don't know. How do you know if he can see or not?
Steve,
Yeah.
you might be able to hear you. Can you see Steve, Christina?
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hopkins School Board workshop this evening. On our agenda is an update on our McKinney-Vento and our homeless and McKinney-Vento progress report, and also just a board cultural building between all of us that are here this evening. So welcome to the table and everyone who's coming in the audience. Happy to see you all here tonight. And I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and greetings to everyone in our audience. Good evening, board members, and those of you listening online. I'd like to welcome our presenters, Holly Magdance and Dre Jefferson. We might have an additional guest coming from Move Forward, but we are really fortunate to have the opportunity to let you know about the programming that we offer our students who experience homelessness. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act authorizes the Federal Education for Homeless Children and Youth program, and this supports the education of children and youth experiencing homelessness. McKinney-Vento was also reauthorized in 2015 as part of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. Also, maybe Holly will go into this, but one of the myths about homelessness is that it only afflicts families who are in our urban core, and really the truth about housing security is that it affects all kinds of families, right? Within our urban cores, within suburban and rural areas. And in fact, as the shortage of affordable housing increases, then so does housing insecurity for many families in Minnesota and across our country. So we're really fortunate to have really thoughtful people here who are paying attention to all of the rules and regulations so that our families can receive the support. And then at an earlier board meeting, Director Roper, you had asked a question around whether or not our facilities can provide shelter for our families. And so I did pose that question to our team, and they got back to us, and I got back to all of you. And then you did request a follow-up just to maybe ask some questions and engage a little bit more around that, just to make sure we're doing everything in our due diligence to support our families. So that's why we have Mr. Jefferson at the table, who works in our facilities department and is really familiar with, all of the factors and variables that go into how we operate our spaces. So it looks like we're welcoming Ms. Lozano to the table, and whenever she's ready, welcome, Gricia. Thank you for being here.
So sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay.
You're good. Gricia Lozano works at Move Forward, and we're very grateful for their partnership. And Holly, may I turn it over to you, and you can proceed with the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Peary Reed. We are grateful to have this opportunity this evening to share some information about what we're seeing in terms of trends for students and families experiencing homelessness here in our school district, and then also going into that really, really thoughtful question posed by Director Roper about what some different considerations around utilizing our school buildings to provide emergency shelter might look like. So I will just kind of give an overview. First of all, I just wanted to briefly explain what McKinney-Vento is. Dr. Mary Peary Reed already did a very good job, but it's a federal law that mandates that school districts provide educational stability support services for students that are experiencing homelessness. And the way that the law defines homelessness is a little different than sometimes, I guess, the common perception, because the primary nighttime residence for our families experiencing homelessness is actually what we call doubled up. That means staying temporarily with family or friends. This could be a situation where a family had housing and then couldn't afford it any longer, got evicted, and they have nowhere else to go and end up crashing on couches or floors in a temporary state. So what we are seeing at Hopkins Public Schools, and we're seeing this across the metro, across the state, across the nation, is that our number of eligible McKinney-Vento students has just continued to rise at a pretty rapid pace. Part of this is because of just the timing. We had some certain protections during the COVID-19 pandemic with the eviction moratoriums, and then also just the raising the inflation and increased rent costs that are increasingly unaffordable for our working families. We've seen quite a dramatic increase in numbers. So far to date, as of April 2nd, 134 students pre-K-12 qualify for McKinney-Vento in our district that we've identified. There are very likely more, unfortunately, and I can tell you just since April 2nd, we've qualified several more students that lost their housing over spring break. So this kind of gives you a sense here of what the primary nighttime residence looks like, with doubled up students and hotels and motels being the most common. And I'll just briefly give you an overview of supports in place because I really want to have time for discussions and have time for my colleagues here to share as well. But we do have a District McKinney-Vento. I currently serve in that role, and that is funded through title set-aside dollars. And every school district in the country is required to have someone in the district serving in that capacity. And as a liaison, I kind of serve as a bridge between the schools and then the state in terms of reporting and things and following requirements and qualifying families. And so I work very closely with building McKinney-Vento leads. So those are typically either the school social worker or counselor, in terms of identifying students, getting transportation set up. I work a lot with cross departments in terms of enrollment, nutrition, and transportation. Transportation is the biggest barrier for families that are homeless and highly mobile because it takes time to set that up. And if we can't get kids to school, they can't learn. And so when thinking about the classroom and the needs there, we're in a situation with a lot of these families that they have no other way to get to the classroom unless we have additional supports in place. I'm very excited to share that Hennepin County, Hopkins Public Schools is partnering with Hennepin County on a new initiative called School to Housing. And this is a two-year program that is, we have the county has the funding for 6 years. So we're really excited to be able to extend that. But we have a 2-year contract right now that it's a partnership through the local, they call it Local Homeless Prevention Aid, and really it's a homeless prevention initiative. So we're hoping to get families, keep families in their housing if they're at risk of losing their housing, or if they are in a doubled up situation, or similarly to get them, help support them get housing in place. And Gracia will talk more about that. She's our case manager for Move Forward that supports our school district and Eden Prairie schools on that initiative. But it is a very wonderful supportive program. It comes with rental assistance that is determined and distributed through Hennepin County, but we're able to refer families. This year we have $150,000 in rental assistance available to our families for security deposits or first month's rent or anything like that. We also have funding, $40,000 a year for these first 2 years to support the McKinney-Vento liaison salary and benefits, and we're actively applying for a Minnesota Department of Education 3-year McKinney-Vento subgrant that previously we have not been eligible to apply for as a school district, but we are because of our rising McKinney-Vento numbers and some loosening in the eligibility criteria for school districts. Lastly, there's a wonderful statewide group called the Minnesota Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth, and we meet monthly. It's all the school district liaisons are invited to monthly meetings virtually, and our Minnesota Department of Education representatives that lead McKinney-Vento are there, and it's just a wonderful time to do training and to discuss different scenarios that we see with our McKinney-Vento families and to better support them across the state. And with that, I'm going to turn over to, briefly, considerations. Should we go to the considerations? Yeah, we'll do. Just a couple things I want to just end with before I turn it over to my colleagues here. Again, just in terms of the utilization of our school facilities as a potential shelter is a really, really compassionate idea, and honestly one I hadn't thought of before. And I want to thank Director Roper for bringing that up, and I'd love to continue the discussion here today. In terms of our students, we know the vast majority are sleeping somewhere with the roof over their head. It's definitely not fixed, adequate, or regular, but the vast majority, like we said, are doubled up, staying somewhere. And we also do have in our district established practices for families that we work with that are at imminent risk for becoming unsheltered, such as staying in a hotel and not being able to afford it another night. And Gracia can talk more about that. And she can also speak more to Move Forward's drop-in center at Eisenhower Community Center, which is just right down the hall, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource we have for our teens and young adults experiencing homelessness in the community. And my colleague Dre Jefferson will speak more to this, but there are concerns around safety and supervision and privacy for our families if we were to utilize our school buildings as an overnight shelter, and of course the question of funding and who would oversee it. I'll turn over to Dre and then Gracia.
Yeah, so I can quickly touch on some of the considerations that we talked through as it relates to using the school facilities. Really, it falls into three major buckets: safety/security. Would be the kind of primary area of concern. So that's something that we work with as it relates to the school building throughout the day, throughout the evening, is not only how to keep people out of the school when we want to keep them out, but also how to keep folks in that want to feel safe and feel comfortable. Our school buildings have a lot of exits and entrances, right? Because, fire safety codes and things of that nature. So it's difficult to secure all those doors. And we utilize our safety and security systems with our crash bars, triggering alarms and things of that nature. Obviously, we have staff during the day that has the ability to cover those entrances and exits to make sure that folks are getting in, aren't getting in that aren't supposed to. So that's one area of consideration. Obviously, timelines for us are big as it relates to our school buildings. So students are able to access the building and staff are able to access the building at least 1 hour prior to the school day at our different sites. So what the overlap between folks utilizing the building as shelter versus folks coming in to start their workday would be an area of consideration, and how that looks and what spaces would be used and how they be transitioned. And then beyond that, how we make sure that folks that are utilizing the building are able to exit in a safe and timely fashion to be able to start our school day. When it comes to supplies, we currently don't hold or keep much in the form of supplies as it relates to sleeping bags, cots, things of that nature that allow, like provisions that allow folks to be comfortable and feel secure in their space. So that'd be something that we'd have to address in order to move forward with that process. And then a lot of our utilities in our building are set to cycle overnight for cost savings. So our lights, obviously, our security cameras go dim if there's no activity. Our HVAC and our heating and air conditioning systems cycle overnight, so we don't, since we're not running those over the course of the evening when we don't have students or staff in the building, then we use that as a cost-saving measure. So we cycle those systems. Our water systems, things of that nature, just kind of go into a sleep mode overnight so we can save money. Access to facilities, obviously with showers and bathrooms and things of that nature, would have to be adjusted. And then support. So Holly touched on it a bit when it comes to staffing. And really our biggest thing is how do we turn the building over from one day to the next after evening activities, whether it be kids and company, youth programs, outside programs, community programs. how do we get staff to be able to turn those buildings over and clean them and ready them for the school day. So typically we have 1 to 2 staff in a building overnight or in the evening after the school day to transition it to the next day. We would have to probably increase those staffing numbers to be able to make sure that we're not only setting the building overnight, but we're also resetting it for the school day. So those are just a few of the pieces that we touched on.
I don't have a whole lot prepared. This was pretty last minute, but I'm here just in the capacity of supporting. Before working with Move Forward, I've been working with homeless youth for, almost 10 years, so in Carver County. So I have plenty of experience working with youth who are either in high school or transitioning out of high school, in both shelter transitions and doubled-up housing. So I'm here more to answer questions and to kind of like keep the dialogue going, but just focused a little bit on Move Forward and some of the things that we provide. We are seeing that a lot of youth that are experiencing homelessness are already comfortable, doubled up. It's a very risky population. A lot of the youth and most of the families who are experiencing homelessness are at risk of getting taken advantage of. So very often that place of vulnerability helps them find support within their core group. Most of the time is family members, very often is other community members that they already have a connection to. So it's really difficult for someone to even consider doing a shelter. Most of the time these families are doubled up because shelter is their last resort. They don't want to be in a place where they don't know who they're going to have, who they're going to be brushing up against, who they are going to be encountering on a daily basis, especially if they have children. So for them, it's a lot more comfortable to be in a place where they feel comfortable around the people that are around them. The other things to consider when it comes to shelter versus doubling up is accommodations. A lot of times you want a place where you can take a shower, where your kids are going to be within close distance, where you know that the door's going to be locked and no one's going to be coming up. So that's some of the things that we look into. We do provide drop-in services at Move Forward, and we are just down the hall during the day. So some of the youth that are doubled up and might feel uncomfortable getting some of those things done at their friend's house after school, they can come and get some supplies, then get some food. And we do have hygiene items. We have showers that we have access to so that they can come in and take a shower if they feel uncomfortable doing it at a friend's house. And we also have a washer and dryer so they don't have to worry about paying for that kind of stuff. So some of those things that are in the building are already being taken advantage of by people who are accessing our organization. And then on top of that, we have a service where we go into the schools. So we have case managers that go into the school buildings and do drop-in services and referral services for some of the youth that are experiencing these kinds of situations.
Thank you.
I think we'd welcome discussion and questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being here. Any questions or comments?
First and foremost, thank you all so much for that wonderful presentation and considering like the comment that I had made a few years ago, a few months ago about utilizing our facility for different reasons. And so I really love like the McKinney-Vento like system and how it just works within the schools. And so just two quick questions. One, the use of the buildings was also more so about like when there's cold weather that hits, like as well, you know, like yes, use the building for like, you know, for our families who are like unhoused. But also like if there's an event where we have super cold weather and we need like a shelter, are we able to put a team in place for like a cold weather team or something, you know, to support with those students? 'Cause I know that most likely if it's like too cold outside, that the school building is most likely closed the next day. So I was just thinking through that. And then two, also for like when there is like, air quality alerts outside, and just thinking like how could we utilize a building maybe for like from like 4 to 8 when the air quality is like really bad. you know, just for students who are unhoused to go in, especially for those who have underlying health conditions. So those are just some things, just some creative ways to think about utilizing our buildings. But is there like a building or like a space, maybe like a gym that's not heavily used throughout the district? I know we have a lot of buildings, but is there one that's like less used than most?
That's a great question. I would turn it over to our facilities coordinator.
Like, that was a lot, I know.
No, great question. As it relates to building usage, so most of our buildings, obviously the primary function of their, operations is for school district activities. So as it relates to gyms, they're mostly used for district programming as it relates to school district, like day, regular stuff, and then after-school programs. So our elementaries have kids and company that go to about 6 p.m. in the evening, and then our high school is athletics. We don't have a lot of additional space in our district. Like, we don't have like an activity center that we use our activity center as our normal gymnasium. So there are times of year where they're less frequently used. In the fall and in the spring, they're less frequently used because of outdoor sports. They're not really that heavily trafficked during the, I guess you would say, after-school hours. Our elementary schools are the same. We have 2 buildings that we don't utilize as normal district spaces for us, which is Harley Hopkins and Catherine Curran, which is Uber Medical Academy. So we take control of those buildings after the school day ends. Harley Hopkins has after-school programming to a degree, but we do have, I guess, times of year that we could utilize space for congregation, for folks to not be outside and experiencing these different things. Winter is difficult. Our gymnasiums they're large, so they're not easily heated. And, there's so many doors and windows in some of our spaces that it's hard to, keep them heated. But, yeah, I guess there isn't one specific one that stands out that doesn't get more or less, gets less utilized than the others.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. And just one more other thing. I used to work with homeless youth as well. I worked at all the organizations pretty much. And so I was wondering, is there still a process, is there still coordinated entry within Hennepin County that you have to go through in order to get a child housed? And if so, do we have any partnerships with any of the youth housing complexes? I know that like YouthLink have like the Downtown View, and then there's St. Barnabas where I used to work at, and then there's another one. I can't, the name is failing me right now, but was wondering, do we have any partnerships with those complexes?
Yep. So Move Forward, as I mentioned, does do satellite services. It's tricky with coordinated entry because you legally have to be 18 to be able to be seen by other agencies through coordinated entry and be an age of consent. There are some instances where we can get 16 to 18-year-olds to be in the coordinated entry and be able to be visible if we're able to do temporary emancipation. And that can only happen if we do some of that hand-holding with them. And I think just like a broader response to some of the issues that you've been talking about is that youth and families who are experiencing these kinds of situations end up having these situations with no additional support. You don't plan on being homeless or being at risk. That's not something, usually our experience is families who happen to be in a situation where they didn't know this was coming. And it's understandable. The other piece of it is because you've never experienced this, you don't know where to reach out to. You don't know where to go. And so this is when our partnerships are so important. Having Holly, having the McKinney-Vento grant, and having our organizations partner allows us to be able to come to those families and hold their hand to receive those services. Because there are shelters, there are places, there are grants, there are all of these opportunities for families to get through, but they don't know where to start. And so what we're focusing, especially the Schools to Housing program, what we're focusing on is instead of putting a Band-Aid on some of the things that are happening, we come along families and we support them so that this doesn't happen again. So we really take a look in depth at what was the root of the issue? What caused you to be at this risk of homelessness? Was it a job loss? Was it a family emergency? And then how do we fix that? How do we move forward from that? And honestly, I love my position because that's me. I come to the families when the big holes already been patched. The county's already taken care of that late fee of those 2 months that you were behind. Now it's my turn to come to you with to your family and come up with a plan together and work on those next steps so that we can coordinate a better future for you and your family, or a better future for the youth. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is that pivotal piece is having someone that you can go to get access to those services. More so than having a building available, having someone who says, let's get you into coordinated entry. Let's get you into that emancipation age. Let's get you applying for benefits. Let's get you to the doctor for your mental health. So having someone that can actually help and support that piece is a lot more important to these imminent risk youth to have than it is to have a building to sleep in, because they're very resilient and very resourceful. And most of the time, like I said, if it's too cold, I bet you they have a friend that's gonna let them crash on their couch. But that's not long term. And so when we're trying to find solutions for these kinds of issues, we at least lately have been more focused on having some long-term solutions so that we can support them in not getting back into this spiral of, I sleep on my friend's couch today, and then tomorrow I'm gonna sleep in the street because it's nice outside, and then in 2 days it's gonna be sunny again, and I need to find somebody else to crash with. Instead, we hold their hand, and through coordinated entry, through the school district, through liaisons, through community partnerships, we're able to find everything that we can to provide more long-term solutions. We have a long-term housing opportunity through Move Forward. There are plenty of shelters in the area that are working with us to be able to have a wait list so that when we have openings, we're able to get youth into our program so that we can, again, provide that long-term. And in that long-term housing, we're also providing additional services so they can, once they exit the program, be able to maintain their housing on their own. So it's resources, but it's also skills, it's also support groups, it's also community. And all of those things create a longer-term solution for some of the issues that are happening in the first place that are causing these youth or these families to be at risk of homelessness or in homelessness. I don't know if that directly answered the question, but
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much for that summary. I really appreciate that. I do have one more small question, though. When you were talking, so does the school have funds to, support with rent payments, or did I hear that correct?
Yeah, so this is, well, the county does. So it's, the school district does not have the funds, but the Hennepin County does. And basically what this is, it's the local homeless prevention aid. It's money that came through down from the federal government to states to prevent homelessness. And what the state of Minnesota did is it said, okay, every county can determine how they want to use this homeless prevention aid. And starting probably beginning of last year, I was approached by the now coordinator of the program at Hennepin County, but she wanted to meet with all the school districts to see what are they really experiencing with homelessness, and kind of from that information, the county said, we really want to work with families. We want to work with schools. We want to work with younger families, families with younger children, to prevent homelessness as soon as possible. And so that's kind of what the county said is we want to work with Hennepin County School Districts. Minneapolis already has a similar program through this aid. And I know Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, they do, and another one as well. I can't remember, but Hopkins is one of 6 new districts starting this year that is part of this housing partnership. And kind of how it works is based on how many students we have in our district that qualify for McKinney-Vento, we're allocated a certain amount of dollars, both for rental assistance that Hennepin County manages and operates, and then for additional salary support. And so kind of how it works is So I'm the district lead for the program, and I work with the building site lead. So again, our social workers and counselors, and we work together to identify families that would be a good fit for this program. Really, almost any family would that's at risk of housing, and really they would. But to be eligible for the rental assistance, families have to, at this point, have to have at least one child in either enrolled in a pre-K or elementary school in the district to prioritize the funds for families with younger children. That may change down the line, but what we do then is if we think a family might be interested, we are sure to share information about the program. And if they would like to have a referral, we have a release of information that as a schools, we give them, they sign, and that allows us to refer them to Hennepin County. And at that point, Hennepin County really takes over. We have an assigned housing navigator through School to Housing that works just with Hopkins schools families, and they get back to the family within 1 to 2 business days to set up an appointment, to offer services. Really, they start with an assessment to kind of determine what the family's needs are. And one point I do want to mention is that even though the rental assistance piece is just at this point just for families with at least one pre-K through elementary student, the program works with any family enrolled in our school district. So if you have one high school student in your family and are at risk of losing your housing or currently doubled up, they will still provide that Hennepin County staff or the housing navigation support. And really, it's like Gracia said, it is kind of like that hand-holding that's really helpful because the county is such a big and messy system. Mm-hmm. And then for eligible families for the rental assistance, we meet weekly as a team, as a School to Housing team. So it's Move Forward, because this is a new position.
Yes.
That Gracia is holding thanks to this funding. So she splits her time between Hopkins schools and Eden Prairie. Mm-hmm. And Move Forward already works with those 2 school districts, so it's a really nice fit. So if a family, we meet as before any rental assistance would be determined, we do just meet as a team, just make sure we're all on the same page. But as a school district, we're very removed from the actual rental assistance piece, but we're able to connect them to it, which is really wonderful. And then it is a requirement that any family that is receiving rental assistance works with Gracia as our case manager. So the case manager is a requirement because we know how important that wraparound support is. And she's just wonderful to work with. And and you do home visits?
I do. So I do everything from home visits to paperwork to, I am bilingual, and we are experiencing a lot of families whose Spanish is their only language or otherwise. So I'm able to navigate the language piece as well as the cultural aspects behind that. I've worked a lot with migrants just from all over the world, and I know how complicated the systems are in place in the United States for migrants who don't understand the system itself, whether it's because of language or otherwise, which most of the time it's otherwise. It's not a language barrier, but more of a comprehension and, where do I apply for services and what do I qualify for and how do I know and who do I contact? So I do a lot of that wrapped around piece. Like I said, once that big bandage is put on the rent support from the county, then we're able to come with the families and talk about what are some of the other barriers that they have that need to be assessed and that need to be, when I say fixed, but that's really the word. What else needs to be fixed in order for the family to continue moving forward? And then we develop a plan, and it could be a short-term plan or a long-term plan, depending on what the ability of the family is, and get them services and support beyond that. So sometimes it's, I have a job, but it's requiring me to work hours that I don't have child support for or childcare for, and I don't know what to do. Then I come around and I'm like, okay, well, let's look at applying for child support or childcare assistance. Let's see what's offered on your school. Let's see if there's other sites that are offered. And these are things that families might not know about, and that they wouldn't know otherwise if they didn't receive these kinds of services. So more so than the rent support, a lot of times we're finding families that might not qualify to get that rent support, but are still qualifying to get referral and to get additional services. And I'm working with a lot of those families to find a job, to apply for childcare support, to apply for benefits they didn't know that they qualify for, to be able to maintain their kids in school.
Wonderful. Thank you. I just had a few quick questions, and I wanted to thank you again for all this work, because we all know that stability is one of the biggest indicators for success in education, and the longer we can keep our families in Hopkins, in their community, and in our schools, the better their outcomes. So this work is so critical and important and very needed. And one of the questions I had for you is, I know that we have the data that we have 159 students currently. Do we know how much of an increase that has been
Yeah.
from prior years?
Yeah, I actually have the numbers. So just kind of for context, in 2020, we saw a big jump between 2021, the 21-22 school year, and the 22-23 school year. So in the 21-22 school year, we identified 122 students experiencing homelessness. Last school year, and that would be July 1st through June 30th, we identified 215 families, and there's a variety of reasons for that, as I mentioned before. Last year, we had a fire at one of our larger housing complexes that in our district that displaced, I think it was close to 40 students. So again, that would qualify for McKinney-Vento. So that would, there's a lot of movement and why the numbers are increasing. As Gracia mentioned earlier, we are seeing an increased number as well this year of families that are seeking asylum from Central and South America that are beyond doubled up, tripled, quadrupled up in living situations. And so that's impacting the numbers too. And the cost of rent is just, it's very, very difficult. And a lot of the families we work with are working, and they simply can't afford the rent, the size apartment that they need to be under the occupancy requirements, especially with multiple children.
Most of the families that I'm working with that are housed and were at risk of homelessness, it's because they just couldn't afford the rent. It was just too high. And so as we're coming in and we're supporting with the rent help, we're also supporting with finding affordable housing. So a big chunk of what I do, and I want to say for maybe 60 to 70% of the families I'm working with, the first step is let's apply to more affordable housing. And it's not through anyone's fault, it's just that the rent has increased to the point where their income is just not enough.
Yeah, I think that we see that a lot, especially in this area. And I do know that in the past, there haven't been a lot of local opportunities for families who are experiencing housing instability. And has there been a shift? Are there any more like temporary kind of emergency situations for families, or are we still finding that there just isn't much? And then wondering too, are there any initiatives to increase the affordable housing in this area? I know that's really, really hard for families, and I have to say yet again, for staff who work in Hopkins schools to find housing that they can afford.
Yeah.
I gotta go to the Capitol Hill. Let's take it up a notch. No, but so move forward, and this is a discussion I've been having with our executive director. We've reached out to a couple of the churches in the area. Because these apartment buildings and these apartment complexes are managed by big corporations, the barriers are bigger. And so it makes it really difficult for some of them to accept support from counties, to accept rental subsidies, and that's what makes it really hard for our families. The sliding fees are not available, applications are very expensive. So our initiative is to start working with smaller buildings or landlords who do houses. And so the initiative is to start working with people who are more local to start looking into making affordability happen and coming alongside with, again, the county, who is willing to offer more subsidies, is willing to offer more support on the front end to be able to get the families that stability. But a lot of what we're experiencing is, like I said, landlords and these big companies who are unwilling to take our letters of guarantee. Honestly, this morning alone was probably like the 6th time we've had an issue with a landlord who receives a letter of guarantee. So once you've been approved for support, the county sends a letter of guarantee letting the landlord know that a check will be cut from the county, but it needs to go through the process, and it's on the way. And it states the amount that the check is going to be for, and it's based on the ledger that they have sent the county. And then within 4 or 5 days, if it's past the 5th of the month, they get a late fee. And so that late fee is additional to the check that they receive. And then so this is a constant spiral of, now you owe a late fee on top of next month's rent. So we're trying to find ways to work with the community in more of a community-based solution to find affordable housing for our families. And I know it's not ideal, but these corporations a lot of times are not even based in Minnesota. They're based in Chicago, they're based in California, they're based like outside of the state. So there's no one that we can really talk to other than the building manager, who in turn also has their hands tied. So that's been the frustration around that. We definitely are looking into the legislative piece and trying to find more ways to legislate some of that affordability. We partner up with organizations that work with renters and renters' rights and renters' support, so that if a renter is having an issue with the landlord or with the company, they can have additional support without it being an out-of-pocket cost. But yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that, for sure.
That would be great if you could let the school board know about any of those initiatives. I think in particular, our LAC would be really happy to work on that issue, since we don't want to lose our families because they can't find housing to stay with us. So thank you. Were there any other questions?
I just have one question. For anyone listening and feels compelled to give or to help, do you need supplies in Move Forward? And if so, what kinds of things can we be thinking about?
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We were just talking about this. A lot of the families that we serve are usually families of color who don't want to leave the Hopkins School District. So a lot of the supplies that we need are very specific. For example, we get a lot of donations for like shampoo and conditioner, but we'd love to have more for curly hair, more for that textured hair stuff. Hygiene supplies are in high demand and very few other than, we get the bars of soap and we get the tiny toothpaste. Please, if we can get bigger past the toothpaste, that'd be great, just because those things last 3 days and then you have to come back. Our center's open every day of the week except for Fridays. So if people need to come in, for sure. Food is also always welcome. We don't have a refrigerator, so anything that's non-perishable, we can certainly take in. We also have clothing, so if you have, not a whole lot of clothing, but definitely the jackets, and then like brand new underwear and brand new socks. Those are the kinds of things that we really don't get a lot of donations of, because of what we do, it's used in very unhygienic, so we'd rather just get new stuff. So those are probably our biggest needs as far as the drop-in center. And again, word of mouth, let people know that we're here to help and serve.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your important work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more quick question? I know that renting is increasing and it's very expensive. And I want to just be very mindful of the families and their jobs and their employment. Though, have we ever explored helping the families with home ownership and going through some of those programs? Because I know that once they get a stable home, mortgages are cheaper than rent most of the time, or sometimes. So have that ever been an option explored with the families?
You have so many great ideas.
Thank you.
That is something that we haven't explored. I don't know, I'll let Move Forward speak to it, but I think, at least in terms of the McKinney-Vento program and school to housing, we're looking more at the rental piece just to get families housed as quickly as possible, since we know homeownership takes a lot of time. But I think that it's such a equitable aspiration to have and to be working towards. I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Oh, thank you.
So from my perspective, yes. So usually when I meet with a family, we determine what are some of their short-term and long-term goals. And usually, again, their short-term goals are to make sure that they can afford the place they're at, or to find a place that's affordable for them, and to find a rental space, just to fix those immediate needs. But then we talk about the long-term considerations and what does it take, and a lot of the families are looking into home ownership. And so we talk about so if your long-term plan is to have a home ownership, what are some of the pieces that are missing right now? And most of the time is, I just need to fix my credit score. I need to look into saving for that initial payment. I need to look into, so we do, and it's very different for every family, but we do explore that in the long-term goals plan and talk about what are the next steps to get to those places, so yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here and all of your knowledge and work in this area.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And now we'll move, unless, did you want to say anything to wrap up?
Thanks again for your great presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And so now we can move on to just a quick overview on board governance and our board culture building. We have, I'd say, maybe just 5-10 minutes so that we can have a little break before the meeting begins. And so just wanted to, as we're going through this budget process, I know for a lot of us, this is the first time that we're going through not only the budget process, but also a proposed reduction, which can be really difficult. I remember my first year on the board, we went through a reduction in my first budget session, and that was really hard to wrap my brain around. And one of the things that's hard, I think, as a new board member coming in, especially if you've had another role in the district as either a parent or a staff member, that it's really hard to know to go into those different roles and to know where kind of one stops and one ends and who you are in what situation. And so I thought it would be nice just to have a quick talk about board governance. And also, I'm not sure if you'd like to introduce it at this time, but Dr. Mary Peary-Reed had a great idea for professional development for the board, which is a book called Great on Their Behalf. That I'm hoping that we can all read together. But just wanted to know, just quick.
Chair Andreessen, sorry
yes.
to interrupt, but Kai and I already read it.
Okay.
I was sworn in on that
Yeah,
book,
he's
but
sworn in.
I am just
He lent it to me.
blown away that we are reading this. A
Oh,
great
we
book.
can read it again, I'm just. letting
Very
you-
exciting. We'll
Yeah.
read it again.
For
Well,
sure.
invite us to the book club next time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
sorry.
So, great. So then you will be ready to have discussions at the board table about this book. Perhaps you want to lead our
Yeah.
our discussions. So one of the things I just wanted to talk about with board governance is just an overview of what that actually means, because I think a lot of times people get confused as to what we say when we say governance. And it is that there are some core responsibilities of a local board of education. And those include that we need to ensure accountability, provide support to students, teachers, and administration, advocate for students and schools, and create and revise the school district's goals, mission statements, and policies. And the other piece that we are responsible for is to hire the superintendent. And we also work as a team. We are a collective, we are a board. Our power lies in the board as a group and not as individuals on the board. And so just wanted to have some discussions around that and about, I think last time, we talked about our different roles as people and what we're bringing to the table. And I think that one of the things that's great is that we bring those experiences to the table, and it makes the collective piece of the board stronger. So just wondering if we wanted to kind of go around and talk a little bit more about what roles we're bringing to the table and how that informs our board service and governance specifically. Welcome, Director Westmoreland.
Thank you.
You're here just in time for the fun part.
I'm bringing my backpack to the table. Here I am. Ready to unpack it.
Ooh. Is there lots in it?
Oh, there is.
And maybe to add to that warm welcome, congratulations on your recent doctoral
Thank you.
degree. So Dr. Jennifer Westmoreland.
Portland.
I appreciate it.
Really?
Thank
Yes,
you.
that's a big deal.
Thank you.
Should we call you Dr. Director
Nope.
Westmoreland?
Please.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So I can go first. I think one of the hardest things for me to put aside when I came onto the board was my role as a parent. I was pretty active in my kids' schools and knew a lot of the administrators and teachers and felt very close to them. And that was really hard to kind of take that step back and be like, oh, I'm a board member now. And while that relationship doesn't go away, it is, you know, it shifts. You know, you can't use their cell phone number anymore. So, yeah, knowing that I'm now in that governance role and those lines of communication between staff and superintendent are more important.
And what's the question that you had asked about, like?
Yeah, just what has your experience been about your role prior to being a school board member and then your role as a school board member and governance? Kind of more of that governance level.
I think with me, I was, like you, also very involved. Like, I remember the first month me and Dr. Mary Perry Reed sat down for coffee at Monka Beans, and I was just talking to her about, like, the school district and everything. And so having my parent hat on, sometimes I just run inside the school, drop my kids off and everything, but also have to be mindful that I'm still a board member. And knowing that there's like a lot of misconceptions about board members and what we do, just really trying my best to ensure that I'm being very kind and just, communicating with people and just, being a human to folks and not trying to walk around like, oh, I'm on the board. And so I want to just make sure that I'm very still human-centered in my board role and trying to, of course, mitigate any conflict that comes up with a very warming welcome and trying to just support people where they're at with things because it can get very contentious at times. So So that's just kind of been my experience so far.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm traveling back in time, just in my mind. Don't worry, I'm still here. No, traveling back in time 6 years ago, and kind of some of the identities that I brought with me when I was first elected to the board. So those identities being district parent, a teacher, a union member, an organizer, and how all of those roles really have brought, I think, a lot of unique perspectives to my board work, and that my board work has brought a lot of unique perspectives to those roles. So there's been a really great symbiosis there, and also it's allowed me to lead from a place of the messy middle that, oftentimes when I had this specific lived experience, it was all that I knew, and then I joined the board and started to gain more experience around governance and what that role looked like. It really allowed me to engage more in the nuance, around contract negotiations, around advocating to the legislature, around unintended consequences about a certain type of organizing that could be beneficial to, like this part of our district, right? But not as beneficial to this part of our district. So really challenging myself to see the nuance in things. And that's been part of my leadership journey over the past 6 years.
Thank you.
And I think, Chair Andreessen, just one thing that went in my head, and I think A.J. Crable touches on this in here, I'm excited to reread it, is he talked about the difference between the private sector and the public sector, and how, things that have worked for people in the private sector don't necessarily translate into work on a board in the public sector. So I'm looking forward to refreshing my memory on that, but that was just one thought. And I actually talked with Dr. Mary P. Reed, one of our first one-on-ones, about that. So that's something I've thought about as well.
Could you speak a little bit more about that on, like, your role in the district and then coming on as school board member? How does that apply?
I'm not sure. I truly don't know.
Oh, okay. It's a good insight.
And for me, I think, so I was a parent, well, I still am a parent, always going to be a parent, I suppose. A parent in the district, I think you have blinders on, and you know your experience, and you know what you know. And so I think coming onto the board, I think it's it's a little bit a different mindset. It's not necessarily what's good for your family or your children necessarily, right? Like specifically, and it's more about like, hey, as a district and as a body and as a as an organization, how do we improve things for everybody and not just your little slice? And I think that's a lot of what I think about.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have anything to add, Rachel? You don't have to.
Sure, I'll keep it brief. I think kind of in conjunction with this private sector versus a governing body like this, a lot of my both like personality and my personal roles at home and at work are very much about, I'm very into the specifics. I'm very into how something gets done, and I want, I kind of like and relish those roles, and on the board, it is a different kind of thing where we have to set a vision, priorities, where we have to ask questions and, hold accountability, but the practical details, not that they're irrelevant, but we rarely have anything to do with them. And that sometimes, I don't think it has a lot of negative impacts, but it just requires my own self to remember that we're just, as a board member, that isn't my role to prescribe those specifics.
Rachel, that was something that was hard for me when I first joined the board because like I'm a teacher and I'm a doer and it's like, oh, there's this thing over here. Yeah, we could just do this, you know? And I think that can be really challenging and I still feel that tension like within myself sometimes.
Thank you. Well, we have a couple minutes to take a break, and we can be back here maybe at 7:04. So we have 5 minutes for a break, if that's all right with everyone? Thank you all. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Hopkins School Board for April 9th. We are starting at 7:06 p.m. And I would like to call this meeting to order. Our first item on our agenda this evening is for public comment. There are two ways to provide public comment to the Hopkins School Board. One is to join us here in person this evening, and thank you to all of you who have come to be a part of our school board meeting, and fill out a public comment card to address the board. I do not believe that anyone has completed a comment card to address the board this evening. And you also can leave a voicemail for the school board that will be played during this time. And I do not think we received any voicemails. So just a reminder that we really welcome and like to have public comment at our board meetings. We have 2 times that public comments are part of our board meeting, one at the beginning of the meeting, which is for items that are on the agenda, and then one at the end of the meeting for items that are not on the agenda. So seeing that there are no public comments to be included in the meeting this evening, that takes us to our reports, which we get to start off all of our meetings with our student board representatives' reports. And Grace is here at the table with us this evening. Welcome, so happy you're here. And I don't know if we have anyone online. Oh, Elif is joining us online. Wonderful. I will turn it over to you to decide who gets to go first.
All right, I will say we were actually on top of the game and discussed it beforehand this time. So hello, I'm Grace Riley. I'm one of our senior representatives. So, as many of you are aware, it is the start of a new quarter after break. This is the very last first day of a quarter for all of our seniors, as we do graduate in roughly 2 months. But you know, who's counting? No big deal. And then a teacher/class spotlight that I just wanted to throw in as well. Mr. Swenson is teaching the U.S. History and Culture through film class at the high school. We just started watching Seabiscuit, so it's very exciting stuff. Mr. Swenson's class is really a great place to learn about all things history, all things culture, and kind of everything in between. I believe we are watching 12 to 13 movies this year that are all historically based. So that's just a very exciting thing that I don't think a ton of schools really have. And, you know, on paper it may seem like, oh, it's a class where they watch movies, but there is some pretty rigorous discussion that happens in there too. So it's a great opportunity to be in there. And then we also have a College in the Schools partnership between the University of Minnesota and Hopkins High School. This allows scholars to take college-level classes taught by teachers we have relationships with in the high school while generating an official transcript at the University of Minnesota. It's a great opportunity for students to earn college credits that are paid for by the school district. Currently, human physiology, technology, and medical devices still have openings for the 2024 to 2025 school year. These courses allow scholars to pursue their interests in workings, namely of the human body at college levels within the high school walls and within our schedule. It is different than PSEO because, as previously stated, like it is something that happens within the regular 4-block schedule of the high school. I took CIS Spanish last year, and it was a really great opportunity. It also allowed me to save about $4,000 at Iowa State because I don't have to take a language requirement class anymore. So it's really helpful. It's a great way to save money. And as a grad, I guess, of the program, it is very, very worth it in all regards. Speaking of graduation, we are looking for seniors who are interested in serving as speakers and MCs for our commencement ceremony. if you want to, you must submit an application that has been emailed to Mr. Lopresti. He is coordinating the speakers and the MCs for this year. The Hopkins Royals dance team tryouts will be held on the 13th and 14th of next month, and an informational meeting will be held on April 24th. And then our varsity baseball team is playing at Target Field on May 16th. Tickets are on sale for $15. This price will allow students to watch the Hopkins versus Rogers game and the Twins versus the Yankees game. And I believe that is all I have, so I will turn it over to Elif.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you all. My name is Elif. I am another senior rep at high school. And we just got back from spring break, which means many of our students returned from the Euro AP World trip. It was England, France, and Italy. It is such a valuable experience for we're so thankful for the teachers that program, including Ms. Heimlich. Everyone that I talk to that goes on the trip, absolutely, from last year's to this year's, like, it's never a minute. And then coming up, we have a test, which is April 16th. Juniors will take this test free of charge. Sophomores are able to take a practice test, which I remember doing that, and it was really helpful. Okay, HOSA is our HHS HOSA chapter attended the state leadership conference. The conference is an opportunity for scholars to enhance leadership skills and showcase their skills competitively. In the category for health professionals, Alice Smith, junior subcategory therapy. The event consisted of 2 rounds. Round 1 was multiple choice tests, and round skills assessment of therapy techniques. So huge congratulations to Alice. Coming up, the National Honor Society is doing a big in partnership with the council. So the proceeds from this event will be donated to women advocates for shelter for victims of domestic violence in the U.S. Then tomorrow, April 10th, is Eid, and many of our students will celebrate at home with their families. As you all know, one of our most recent years having this school day off, along with many other districts. The Thursday before spring break, Muslim scholars gathered at HHS together, which is called Iftar. This event took place in the cafeteria at HHS and was planned by our Muslim Student Association. Staff present included Sadio, who's one of our Relate therapists, and Principal Ballard. This is the first time this has happened at HHS, and our MSA plans to make this a recurrent event when Ramadan falls during the school year. And I will actually be leaving right after to have Iftar with my family.
Thank you, Elif. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Elif, I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Did
can hear
you did you make a visit to the UN, and if so, how was it?
I did make a visit to the UN. It was wonderful. I had the best time. I missed a ton of school, and I had to like that. But it was an incredible experience. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I met with really cool people, like different representatives from all different nations. The one from the U.S. was really nice, and I got to sit in on really about what was it? Palestine and women's rights in different countries. One of the countries that I spoke about was actually Somalia, which is really cool because Minnesota has the largest Somalian population. So I got to learn a lot about the country. Yeah, it was fun.
Very cool that you got to do that.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, both of you. I hope you enjoy spending this upcoming holiday with your family. And Grace, thank you for your update as well on college in the schools. I know my family benefited a lot from that and the PSEO program, so thank you for giving it a shout out. It's a great part of Hopkins, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. Any other questions or comments for?
I do have a question for Grace. Are there prerequisites to take before you take one of those courses? What does that entail?
Yeah, so I know specifically for the Spanish one, it's CIS or it's listed as Spanish 5 and Spanish 6. So you typically start Spanish or whatever language you're choosing in 7th grade or now 6th grade at the middle school. And then by the time I was a sophomore, my first year in the high school, I was in Spanish 3, which was I don't want to say a step above, but it was a level above the, regular, I guess, grade level class. And then you build off from there. So seniors that started their Spanish on track on grade level will be going into Spanish 5 this year. Of course, that being if they didn't double up or if they didn't get an acceleration requirement or anything like that. So I know specifically for the language classes, there are prereqs, but maybe Ms. Ballard can answer this better than I can. I don't entirely know if for the other ones that aren't structured like a kind of course study throughout that, I don't know if there's prereqs for those ones.
And in addition to just identifying which CIS courses have prereqs, what would you say are a couple of ways we can better prepare, say, 7th through 9th graders to be able to enter into and do well in advanced placement, CIS, and other sort of honors or advanced level high school courses? I know it's an age-old question, but I thought I would just ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly one of the biggest things, at least from my perspective, is just having teachers bring awareness to it. I know specifically for kind of any of our level classes or that you have to have prereqs to kind of enter into them. That really wasn't something that was on my mind in 7th grade until a teacher said, hey, just so you know, you're already, in my case specifically, you're already a step ahead. So if you choose not to take Spanish for a year, because I was considering maybe dropping it to take something else, she said you'll be on grade level and you'll lose the advantage that you kind of naturally have built in. And then we had a very, very long, extensive convo about that. So I would say kind of in my opinion, one of the easiest things to do is just bring awareness to the benefits of it, have that talk like my teacher had with me, and just kind of all around make sure that students know the benefits versus just saying oh, well, it's a class that you can take, kind of more so laying out this is a class that you can take and here's why you should take it, has been very helpful for me. So that's a long-winded way of saying awareness.
That's really specific. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I think, too, it's helpful that teachers at that level know what's available at the high school, so they can have those conversations. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And also the heads up that graduation is coming. So we all need to be prepared for that.
What day is graduation?
Un momento.
I have it on my calendar as a saved date.
Our graduation ceremony is on June 6th. Our last day of school is on June 4th, and our senior class party is on June 5th.
And Grace didn't have to look at anything to mention those dates.
Etched in her heart.
Yeah.
And where is the graduation?
Mariucci.
Mariucci.
Now we know. Confirmed.
Great, thank you so much. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Mir-Piri-Reed for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. And I do have just a briefer presentation this time since we've only had a few days of school between our last board meeting and now, but I want to warmly welcome everyone back from spring break and in visiting a couple of our schools yesterday. While there was a lot of eclipse hype, of course, There was also a very palpable and positive energy and strong sense that students and staff were glad to be back. So welcome back, everyone. I know that the vast majority of our students really love to be in school. Many of our students benefit from the consistency of a daily routine, and for some, school is a place where students feel loved and safe. So it's really important to acknowledge that spring break isn't sort of that week-long magical experience for all of our students, and that truly our kids really do love to be in school. And I hope that all families and staff who traveled somewhere were able to travel safely and have fun, but also families who stayed in town were able to relax and do some fun Minnesota activities. So speaking of all of the excitement yesterday, as the moon crept across the edge of the sun yesterday afternoon, students at Heisenhower Elementary, you can see their faces on that slide, they ventured outdoors to witness the eclipse. The cloud coverage made it a little difficult to view, but students had fun learning about the solar eclipse and why protective eyewear is needed when viewing it. Marcia Curley, who was our Kids and Co lead at Gatewood, shared that kids were excited to go out at 2:01 and then again at 2:30, and some of the kids thought they saw a little sliver of light at 2:30, but she herself didn't see anything. And Ms. Curley talked with students about the next time that the eclipse will be visible in Minnesota, which will be in 2044, when our students will be adults. And so apparently this fun fact alone yielded interesting conversation. Gatewood also had eclipse coverage on the big screen in their multi-purpose room so that students could see when the sun was completely covered with just a ring around the outer circle, like you see on this slide. And this photo came from John Wetter, head of our IT department, who traveled to be in the path of totality. So now that the eclipse is over, I think we can just focus on school. I want to acknowledge that it is testing season. So between now and the end of May, students at multiple grade levels will be taking exams. Our multilingual learners recently finished the access test. The MCA is starting up very soon for many of our students, 3rd through 5th graders, our middle school students, and many of our high school students. As Grace mentioned, 10th and 11th graders will be the only ones in school on April 16th. Was that Grace or Elif? Okay. Elif mentioned that our sophomores and juniors will be in school on April 16 for the practice or to take the actual ACT test, and then our high schoolers who are in advanced placement courses will take their exams throughout May. So it is heavy testing season, and I wanted to reinforce with all of us in our community that while we know a single test score of any kind does not comprehensively represent what any student knows or is able to do, we want to be very intentional with how we administer and facilitate our exams and testing during this season. We've been very intentional with our messaging to parents to let them know that all of our exams are very important and that supporting students at home with good sleep and encouragement is really critical during this time. Also, parents and guardians, and this the message that you see on the screen is just an example of what went out in, I think this is in Principal Melissa Ness's newsletter, but all of our principals have sent similar messages to parents in their newsletters. We've also let parents know that while parents and guardians have the right to refuse standardized testing, administering the MCA is not optional for any public school district in Minnesota, and a parent refusal form must be on file with the school the week prior to testing. So we do believe that strong test participation helps us more accurately represent the teaching and learning value add of our schools, and we just want to balance that with an acknowledgement that it's a lot of testing for students, so there is testing fatigue really is a thing, and we just want to support our kids as much as, and our staff and test proctors as much as possible during this time. So one big thing to celebrate is the Hopkins Education Foundation has recently awarded more than $76,000 in Spark grants to 23 Hopkins teachers in their classrooms. And if you take a look at the HEF website, you can read about the educator grants, which support a range of projects from Shakespeare and Henry V to props for music class, outdoor learning, mud pies, farm animal care, adaptive equipment, solar panel models, and social emotional wellness. So a huge thank you to HEF as well as our generous donors from the Royal Bash and throughout the year. This is a photo of Mr. King, Ms. Myers, and HEF reps, as well as Gatewood's goats, Cinnamon and Sugar, and the chickens, and they were all awarded a grant that will provide supplies for the farming program at Gatewood. So thank you to this generous grant. Gatewood students will also have the chance to learn agricultural skills with the equipment that is purchased. Thank you, HEF, for your support. As our student board reps mentioned, Hopkins is one of 4 Minnesota districts that were recognized in the Sahan Journal in February of 2022 for instituting a non-student contact day so that Muslim students can celebrate Eid. As a new moon was not sighted on Monday evening after prayers, Muslims in Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries are fasting for one more day, that's today, completing 30 days of Ramadan. The first day of Eid will then be celebrated tomorrow, Wednesday, April 10, which is a non-student contact day for Hopkins. And as Elif mentioned, Eid is a 3-day festival that celebrates the completion of the fasting month of Ramadan by Muslims around the world. Although you can say Happy Eid, saying Eid Mubarak is the most common phrasing. Mubarak means blessed, and Eid means feast or festival. So Eid Mubarak to all of our Muslim friends, students, and families and staff celebrating Eid. Next, we're very excited to announce that 2 of the 11 finalists for the Minnesota Teacher of the Year are our very own Hopkins educators. Education Minnesota, the statewide educators union, organizes and underwrites the Teacher of the Year program. Candidates include pre-K through 12th grade teachers, as well as early childhood family education and adult basic education teachers. The selection panel will meet one final time on May 4, and then the 2023 Minnesota Teacher of the Year, Michael Houston from Harding High School in St. Paul, will announce this year's honoree at a banquet at the St. Paul River Center on May 5. The finalists, so our 2 finalists, and likely their families and their colleagues, their school leaders, and also I will be in attendance at the banquet. And we hear that maybe a field trip of Alice Smith kindergartners is also in the works. So we're really excited to recognize Ellen Wu and Laura Jensen, who truly are fabulous teachers. I've been in their classrooms several times, and we're really happy that they made it this far, and honestly that we had the 4 semifinalists. That was exciting too. So that is it for my report this evening. I did want to close by letting everyone know that the budgeting process and season is still underway. The school board did ask the superintendent and her cabinet to go back and review what more could be done to lessen the impact on library media specialists. So we have engaged in that work and will be prepared to share more at our April 23 board meeting. This is also the board meeting where we will present the preliminary budget for fiscal year 25. Today we had a 4-hour budgeting and staffing meeting with our school and district leaders to review where we are right now, with our school and district budgets, our preliminary budgets, and also collectively identify next steps to prepare for April 23. And so it is a very difficult time, and we're trying to engage in this work as thoughtfully as possible. And that's it for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry-Reed. Any comments or questions from my board colleagues? Well, I appreciate seeing the update on the solar eclipse. I also traveled to be part of the totality, so appreciated the photo. I got my own. It was quite the experience. It was amazing, so.
Where were you, Sharon? Teresa?
In Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, cool.
Yes. It was very warm and then got very cold. Okay, anyway, I'll stop being geeky about it. So then we can move on to an approval of tonight's agenda. I would look for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes, and the agenda is approved. That takes us to our consent calendar. These items provide the board with information considered to be more routine in nature. If the board deems an item to be necessary for additional discussion, a motion can be made to move the item to new business. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes, Clerk Thompson.
Thanks. One of the things that I'd seen in here that seemed to have a lot of information in it that I had some questions, I felt like might need some more discussion, some more eyes on it, was letter D, the A&I plan and budget. So I'd like to make a motion that we move that into new business.
I have a motion to move out of the consent calendar, item D, A&I plan and budget. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. So the item D, A&I plan and budget, has been moved to new business in the agenda. Any objection to having that come first before the K through 12 framework? Would that be a good spot?
If we could put it second.
Second.
Dr. Camphy will be here for the entire meeting, but we'd like to let Ms. Gull go if she needs to after the math presentation.
Great, so we will move it to second in new business. So with that removal from the consent calendar, do I have a motion? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar without item D?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We then move on to the treasurer's report, and our treasurer is back from her world travels. So we will have a much more succinct and hopefully numerically correct report this time. Unlike in your absence.
I don't know if succinct is exactly the word, but good evening, everyone. I am back from my extended trip out of the country. It was fantastic. It ended in Montreal, so I could also look at the eclipse, which was really amazing, even more amazing than we thought it would be. But I'm happy to be back, and thank you very much to my board colleagues for covering me with regards to treasurer's reports. This most recent period was dated March 15th to April 2nd, and during that time, we had fewer line items for electricity than we typically did. We paid a bit over $3,000 this period, as opposed to a more typical for the winter period outlay of $15,000 to $17,000 for our electricity service, due to their billing periods falling just outside of our normal kind of budgeting cycle. So we'll likely see that difference during our next period. We paid $5,773 to various private and charter schools that exist within our boundaries to satisfy our state-mandated support requirements. And I think I will talk a bit more about those requirements at a later treasurer's report. To the University of Minnesota, we paid $10,730 in college and schools fees and tuitions, and because our very capable student board rep, Grace, just went over it, I want to avoid a subpar recap of that, but I will say it's just one of a few ways our high school students can earn college credits. The program's free to students and therefore represents a substantial savings to our graduating seniors and their families. $54,153 was paid to some construction vendors related to moving our fiber internet cables and hardware to comply with the huge construction project that's going on along Hopkins Crossroad. That project, which incidentally runs right by my own home, is to remove all above-ground utility poles and wires and install an 8-foot wide biking and pedestrian path. This project, which has caused the district quite a few traffic delays and other inconveniences over this year, is very necessary, as it is currently a treacherous 2-lane road with no sidewalks. And many of our students at Tanglin North Middle School and Hopkins High School use that route every day. The state and city covered most of those costs, but this $54,000 was the district's responsibility to ensure that our connection to fiber internet for all 3 schools was both compatible with the newest hardware and uninterrupted, so learning time isn't lost. We paid $93,000 to Intermediate School District 287. This is again required by law, as many of the students in Intermediate District 287 are actually our Hopkins students. Our students attend that school for a variety of reasons, such as highly specialized education, treatment, or extra help transitioning from school to post-secondary adult life. And several other districts besides ours have students in that intermediate school district, and 287 exists so it can more efficiently administer those highly specialized supports. And we pay District 287 on a per pupil basis to fund those supports. We paid $115,511 for food, most of which, but not all, is reimbursed by the state's Universal School Meal Program. We paid $249,113 in various transportation-related fees, both for our regular school day service and a variety of other activities, and that total is very much on par with all of our recent 2-week period expenditures. One small expense that we pay is approximately $50 per board meeting to publish our meeting minutes in the Sun Sailor, and that is in accordance with Minnesota State Statute 123B, that a school board must publish their minutes in its official newspaper. In Hopkins, we pick the Sun Sailor to be our official newspaper, and the board actually votes on that in the consent calendar every year. And there is some, and I actually have no idea if it was reintroduced this legislative term, but some movement to make it so that the school's own website and publishing their minutes there counts as publishing it publicly. I don't know the status of that, but I could check into it. In contrast to that relatively small expense, an enormous one for us in this and every period is to pay for substitute teachers, nurses, PT, OT, speech therapists, and mental health professionals. In this last period alone, we paid almost $191,000 for those contracted services. It's important to note that this number reflects the invoices we've received and paid during this period. It's not the number of literally all of the substitutions and events that happened in only the last 2 weeks. But it's a large number that's on the radar of admin, and one of the reasons that a piece of our budgeting talks includes expanding the permanent substitute role into more of our schools, so we're less reliant on some of these contracted services. And with that, I move we approve total disbursements in the amount of $1,433,627.78 for the period of March 5th to April 2nd, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The treasurer's report has passed, and we can move on to what's next on the agenda as unfinished business. Just a quick update, our vice chair, who is chair of the Monitoring and Policy Committee, cannot be here this evening due to a prior engagement, and the committee, since it was spring break since we met last, has not met to discuss the policies that are in unfinished business. So we will get an update at our next meeting on that, on policy 514 and policy 524. So that takes us to, so there's no action required by the board on that piece of business. So then we will move to new business, which is our K through 12 math framework. And I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. I'd like to welcome our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, Dr. Ann Ertl, our Assistant Director, Dr. Leanne Campy, and our K-12 Math Specialist, Elsa Gull, to the table, and just acknowledge the work that they've put into putting together information for our board, but also building our K-12 math framework for Hopkins. For decades now, educators and parents across our entire country have had many questions about what constitutes effective math instruction. Many want to know, how do districts detrack their students and courses effectively? What math curricula emphasizes conceptual over procedural learning, and what are the best practices to help teachers make math learning relevant for students? These are all important questions, and I personally am very grateful to Ms. Elsa Gull for joining us in Hopkins. She's really brilliant in thinking about how we can move our systems and structures and practices toward mathematical instruction and learning that that helps students deepen their thinking and really helps students think of themselves as mathematicians, which is really important for our students' future, for a number of, just being able to engage civically, but also lots of jobs out there require a level of math understanding and at least mathematical thinking. So grateful for you, Elsa, and Anne and Leanne, for being here, and I'll just turn it over so you can get on with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mary Peary-Reed. Good evening, Chair Andreessen and board members. Thanks for inviting us to talk about our math pathways that, as Dr. Rhoda indicated, Elsa has been working really feverishly on since she joined us in late August or early September. So without much more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Campy. And the reason that she is also at the table tonight is because, as you know, historically, math has been deeply intertwined with our enrichment or gifted programming. And so we have been working together with Elsa to both to support and work on both of those programs at the same time. You can go to the next slide.
Good evening, everybody. So like Ann said, we are cognizant of the fact that previously in Hopkins, we really focused all of our school-wide enrichment or gifted and talented services on math acceleration. And there are very many more ways that students can be gifted, and at the same time, we want to make sure that we have opportunities for students whose gifts fall in the realm of math. So last year, prior to both Elsa and I being in the roles that we currently are, a team that included our math teachers from across the district spent time talking about if we are going to have heterogeneous classrooms, what do we believe that needs to look like so that all students have access to rigorous mathematical experiences. And so you can see in front of you a vision statement that was crafted by that group of people. And the goal was that we would take that this year and move forward as Elsa has done with us. Further, the new Minnesota State math standards focus both on conceptual knowledge of math as well as the ability to execute mathematical functions and reasoning. So you can see that the mission statement or the vision statement that they came up with is aligned to the new standards as well.
Thank you, Dr. Campy. Good evening. I would like to introduce myself, Ilse Gall, and I am so grateful to be here tonight, and I've spent the last several months just getting to know all the teachers and scholars and caregivers and administrators in this district, and it's been a wonderful experience so far. You have a lot to celebrate here, and I think one of the things that really stood out to me was as the new 2022 math standards were coming out, Hopkins seems already well on a path to success with implementation on these new standards. And so this slide is just an excerpt from the vision statement focused on career, college, and community readiness. And I'm just gonna read a little bit about it. Mathematics belongs to all of us. Mathematics is part of our everyday lives and is rooted in all cultures. Equitable access to mathematics for each and every student is accomplished by recognizing, respecting, and attending to the diversity of our students with the aim of ensuring that all students are able to learn and thrive. The goal of mathematics education is to prepare each and every student for effective participation in society, including their careers, post-secondary education, and daily decision-making about everything from finances, personal health, civic discourse, and policy making to their ability to comprehend and analyze data. And finally, mathematics education needs to evolve with the constant cultural and technological changes in our society. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report lists complex problem solving, critical thinking, reasoning, analytical thinking, and active learning in its list of top 10 workplace skills. These are all skills that are developed in the study of mathematics throughout a student's K-12 experience. And the reason I highlight all of this is just to remind us that we are part of a scholar's journey to their future after Hopkins, and we need to be mindful of how we are best preparing them to achieve their highest aspirations, which kind of leads me to, unfortunately Grace left, but I thought she did such an excellent job of pointing out, if I just know what my options are in front of me, what a powerful tool that is, which is what leads us to our next slide of how do we know what paths are available to students. So this slide is kind of bleak, right? So if a student is to go through K-12 pretty much in one track, this is what it may look like with maybe some differentiated instruction options in 12th grade. There are districts actually right now that are aligning K-12 for all students for the purpose of equity, that all students have that same pathway with the same finish line. I'm not suggesting that this is what our community is asking for. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see with personalization and some opportunities for students to engage in additional math at different points in their Hopkins career, that they might find a more personalized pathway to get through the level of math that they should aspire to reach. What is missing from this, I would say, is what's after it, and what are the career and community and college goals that a scholar may have, and then what might be the best pathway identified for them from an early age so that they should know when maybe to engage as a 7th grader when they're not necessarily thinking about those next things. So if we can provide those opportunities early, I think that would be very beneficial. So that's kind of where my work is going next. So going to the next slide, I'll just briefly touch on each of the levels. So elementary school, what a fabulous group of teachers you have working in our math classrooms. And if you have students in the Hopkins district, you recognize how different math learning can look than maybe when we were all in school. and it's something to be really wonderfully proud of. Our students are really working on deep conceptual understanding alongside procedural fluency, so that we not only have the how to do the math, but we're learning about the why. Why does it work this way? And then also connecting to real-life application so that it can transfer outside of the classroom experience. Also, K-5 classrooms are heterogeneous, so it's a great celebration of diversity in our classrooms, which fosters rich engagement with students between each other, as learners, as peers in the classroom, and students get the opportunity to defend their thinking, celebrate their creativity in process, and kind of break away from there's one right way to do it. And when you are able to accomplish that type of community in your classroom, learning really just blossoms. And so this is a lot to be proud of. When we move on to the middle school, this is where, again, in draft form, we are proposing some opportunities for students to come together in 6th grade and building community as they are merging from multiple elementary schools and developing that rich, deep understanding of conceptual math in 6th grade. Also, keeping in mind that middle schoolers are going through a lot of transitions in going to a bigger school, more independence, they have multiple teachers, there's just a lot to navigate. And so having that kind of common grounding moment for them to all begin this next journey together, I think is very important to the teachers at the middle level. However, we would like to offer some opportunities for students who are feeling ready and interested and aspire to engage in some additional mathematics, so that if they should have some very maybe STEM-centered goals for their ultimate, finish line of high school, that they have opportunities to reach higher level math before they graduate. And so this is an example of 4 different ways a student could move through the middle level. And then finally, at the high school, there's nothing I have created here. This is just simply the map of coursework at the high school at this time. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to lean into data science and statistics even more, computer science and making connections between math and other content areas, and find new ways to engage our scholars at the high school level while helping them to achieve their goals before graduation. And I think that's all we've got.
Great, well, thank you so much. Are you open to questions?
Sure.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Any comments or questions from my board colleagues?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have I have many questions, but specifically now, what does the rollout look like, right? Is this something for next year, a few years? And could you, roughly sketch what it looks like?
What specifically are you referring to for rolling out?
It seems like a lot of the attention or the change maybe is in that middle section, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, great, because that's kind of the rungs to get to where we need to go. What will parents and students kind of experience next year, and how is it different? And how do we make the determination? Because there's different tracks, right? And I think Grace did us a really great favor by saying that awareness is so key, because we don't know what we don't know, right? And so, what's the high-level plan for rollout?
Sure. Well, Elsa has been having parent engagements at both of our middle schools on this topic to share about these, essentially what they are is compacted course opportunities, so that she mentioned students who are interested, have high willingness, aptitude, sort of stick-to-itiveness, have an opportunity to do additional math coursework. And this is a pretty common strategy in the world of enrichment and gifted and talented education. It's called course compacting. And so students would be able to engage with that content and get feedback and support with one of our math teachers. But are held harmless for the results. So if they are successful, great. If they're not, they can try again the next year. And so really that model allows for kids to have lots of different entry points into these opportunities and try again if they didn't get it the first time. We are in the development phase of those compacted courses that will be completed over the summer. And students will be made aware of those opportunities. I don't think it's going to happen like the first week of school. I think when the teachers really feel like they want to set a solid foundation, but perhaps in the late fall or early winter, families would receive communication about those opportunities.
And I want to just reiterate that a big goal of ours, and I say ours in speaking with teachers and working in collaboration with teachers, is to ensure that all students feel invited and have many opportunities to engage. So it isn't something that a test determined whether or not you get the invitation. It's kind of this open opportunity with multiple on-ramps. So I think that would be the goal. And yeah, we're hoping to roll this out next fall.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Clerk Thompson.
Thanks. Can you go back to the middle school slide in particular? Perfect. Well, first and foremost, just thank you so much for getting this together. We have been in desperate need of this, I'll be honest. And so in that vein, I think it's important to recognize to current 6th and 7th graders that this was not in place for them yet. Now something will be. So, because based on that, they can't get into that bottom row, So, we just need to acknowledge that, I think. So, thank you for doing that. I guess my question is there a thought or concern that, this puts pressure on a middle school student, it puts pressure on a middle school math teacher, that in the old way of kids entering 7th grade at different points based on having been in, my 8th grader, it was never called track gifted and talented, but I understand it was in practice, So instead of entering there, now these 3 years need to make some decisions, need to potentially give up a win time, where, does the kid have to choose between all-star choir for win time or this? Would that choice and that pressure to decide that have been alleviated if for over the course of the elementary years, they then funneled into where they wanted to be in 7th grade? So I guess that's kind of my question.
Well, I would say that to speak to a couple of things, putting students in a position of leveled math courses very early has shown to be very detrimental to the completion of coursework going into high school. So students identify as either I am good at math or I'm not good at math. There are people in this room who will probably feel the same way. I'm good at math or I'm not good at math. And it's not a binary, and I think that if we establish that too soon with students, it's just proven to be quite detrimental to their future. Another thing that I would say is really exciting about math education, I have the luxury of researching and learning all of the fantastic things happening in math ed right now, which I also hope to share more with you all and caregivers in our community, because I think it's really good news that students are really getting to have more access to deep conceptual understanding and given the freedom to explore math more creatively and creating their own meaning in the math along the way, rather than there's one right or wrong way. So if I'm good at replicating a procedure, then I'm gifted, when that will catch up with a student, because a student who can just repeat an algorithm will get a ticket to something else and start skipping conceptual content that they need to have to be successful in the future. And now a student who was gifted with given all of these advantages of skipping will run out of the opportunity to perform well just with procedural knowledge. So we have some shifting happening. So that's why we want to hold students to their grade level content throughout the elementary years, because that is the foundational time in K-8 or K-7 technically to prepare students for algebra. And success with algebra is very indicative of a lot of what comes after. So if we really set students up for success, that's really our priority. And then to second, yes, it is hard for students or teachers to be in classrooms with heterogeneous groupings. And one thing that is also on my list of to-dos is to really address teacher development and being adequately prepared to successfully navigate a heterogeneous classroom. And that's, that's a big shift. And I don't know that there is enough strength in our teacher prep programs to prepare teachers for anything they really get handed in a classroom, but our goal that we have is to really embed more professional development opportunities to help teachers feel equipped for this. And there is a lot of support out there because this is happening all over the nation and all around the world. And so there's a lot of programs and tools that we can use to help teachers feel more successful in these spaces, and we just need to deliver them.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Director Westmoreland.
So what I hear you saying is that differentiation is already happening in our classrooms because we're focusing more on conceptual application and being able to apply these foundational concepts in ways that are interesting to each student. So I'm thinking about the parent carryover teacher conferences that I experienced with my scholar at West and how it was super exciting for me talking to their math teacher, and I am one of those people who was tracked as not gifted in math, right? So I have like this very I even felt my system get activated as I walked into the math classroom. I'm like, this isn't even your math class, calm down. So I was really pleased to hear how the core tenets of IB were being embedded in that curriculum, and that students were offered kind of these different ways of engaging with the material. So they were talking about volume, and they were doing work around like how much popcorn could fit into a container. And there were different levels at which you could engage in that work, right? So if this concept of volume was something that you were still kind of trying to wrap your mind around, here was an on-ramp for you. If you're like, I got it, volume, cool, like here's an on-ramp for you. And then there was this design component where they were designing the container for the popcorn. And so I know that this isn't the only example of differentiation and concept-based learning that's happening. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's really helpful for our community to hear these specific examples.
Thank you for that question.
Explain like
The low floor, high ceiling. I know, so this is, if you think back to being in school, it was the teacher would model a procedure, and then you would all just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and then the next day you would get a new procedure or a new way to use that. And now what's really fun are these rich tasks. So it's these big, deep questions that a student may never get to done even, because it just leads to more questions and more questions. And so we call these low floor, high ceiling tasks, where a teacher will carefully craft a task where all students can access the problem with some level of understanding, no matter what they come into the room with. But the task is designed in such a way that it can just keep expanding and expanding, expanding. So as a student can have curiosity and readiness to go further with it, they certainly can. And so it's a different way of approaching math, and it's so much fun to watch in practice. And the teachers engage differently, where it's rather than the teacher at the front of the room doing a lecture format, they're coaching. And it's not that they just stand aside and go take a coffee break. It's that the teachers are right there with that just-in-time learning for a student who's getting stumped in the process, and like, what can I give you just that one little piece that you need to get to the next part of the problem? Or how can they pair strategically two students together where one might be able to assist in that lift just a little bit to get them moving along? And so the teacher is very much present and engaged in assisting in that process as well.
Chair Andreessen, can I ask a question?
Yes, Director Roper.
I'm sorry, Jim, are you done with your questions?
I'm done.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, really appreciate it. I just have two quick questions. I'm a 90s kid, so please forgive me, this question is a little silly. One, do they still use scientific calculators inside of the class? Because I know that I did, and was just wondering if those are still in use, like today.
Yes, they are.
Okay. And then two, thinking about math, because my son is a genius in math and he loves it. and I want to continue his track on with math. But just wondering, are you able to share what type of workforce opportunities algebra prepares you for? Because I think that if some of the students knew that, oh, well, to be a scientist, you have to use algebra, or you have to, if they knew about some of the workforce opportunities behind it, then they may be more, interested in, engaging in it. So
Provides
just
the why.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like I haven't used y minus 2, 3 plus b yet in any of my roles, right? But there might be some roles that does require that. So
Yeah.
Right, and you might find, I mean, we could keep going, I could do this for days, but you all use algebra every single day, whether you recognize it or not, and I could give loads of examples of that. But yes, it needs to be explicitly laid out for young people particularly to get that motivation sometimes too, and find the why behind the doing. But I think to go back to the earlier point of having, so I want to be an EMT after I graduate. Okay, what does that entail college-wise? What would I require to get an admission to a college to get to that? Or I want to go into engineering. I want to go into, I want to be in marketing or literally anything, and we can come up with all of these pathways that really align for that student. And then I would also just say that math is this beautiful, I call it the art of solving problems, and I think I don't shy away from problems very easily, and I completely attribute that to being able to be exposed to doing math all of the time. So I think that if you really practice math, you're activating this critical thinking and problem-solving part of your brain that will serve you every single day in your life, because you all have problems every day that we have to solve, right? And so it's not even about career all the time, but it's how does it serve us just as humans trying to function in a challenging world, and helping students to see that and the beauty of it too is our goal as teachers. So that's a great question, and it is one I'm really excited to work on in creating, just these very specific course outlines for students so that they know, okay, if I want to go do this, then this is what I need to check off and accomplish to get there. Thank you for that question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for emphasizing problem solving in all of our work, because that's very critical. So thank you.
Chair Andreessen, I do have one more question.
Yes, Director Rao.
So as we roll this out, I'm very excited. I can hardly contain myself, actually. Seriously, this is, because I took AP Calculus and AP Statistics, and I tell everybody AP Stats is the best class I've ever taken, and that was high school. So fully on board with that. As we roll out and as these things get communicated out, I'd kind of like to invite you back to the board table just to talk about, hey, how are we doing? Is compaction working? How many people are in each swim lane, and are people moving up, moving down? Just kind of some of that data and kind of student outcomes.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited, and I personally want to track this very closely. I'm sure many others would as well. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. The only thing that I would add, I think Elsa alluded to this, but one of our goals for next year is to offer, I don't know if it will be monthly, but regular events, parent engagement sessions around not just our math pathway, but also, I think I'm like you, I have a visceral reaction to math too, and I think the more we can help our families and community, maybe even shift our adult good at math, bad at math mindset, I think that would only benefit our students too. So we are planning to do literacy and math outreach events pretty regularly next year.
And put the adults in the position of a learner and to experience math in this really non-threatening and fun way, I think will help with a lot of bridge building there. And I suspect too, this will all look different before we even start next year, just as I continue to learn and working specifically with the high school and just having all these conversations. It's an ever-evolving process, I guess.
Great. Thank you so much.
I just have one question, Chair Andreessen. Elsa, could you just talk about our district's aspiration and maybe your practical next steps around our elementary math curriculum? I know that our teachers have been piloting Joe Bowler's math and Singapore math and really have been gaining their excitement around differentiated concept-based math instruction. So what are we thinking around kind of systematizing curricula selection?
Thank you for that question. In thinking about how you run a math class, you have your resources and then you have your teacher moves, your pedagogy, and it takes time to select materials that are universally accepted. And so I will be focusing first on pedagogy, which would be our teacher PD that I'm building for next year and helping teachers to feel really confident in all of these new practices, or newer practices. But then secondarily, working on finding resources that best align with what our goals are. What is great about Hopkins is because it is a site-based district, there has been so many opportunities for already running pilots to report back how it's going. And so we don't have to run a bunch of pilots. We already can collect data currently based on all the different currently used materials. However, I would say that the level of excitement to do one's own thing is kind of running out, because I really now want to come together and I want to share my learning with my colleagues, and so there's this real interest in on the part of teachers to find that common thread, and particularly at the elementary level. And so we'll be looking into resources, both primary and supplementary resources that serve our students while keeping our vision in mind. And I don't know if there's anything else to add to that. Okay.
Will MDE provide a state-approved set of curriculum like they did for literacy, or it's still up to districts?
Probably not.
I don't believe that.
That was just by virtue of the READ Act. And
Right.
so until they come out with a Math
Math Act.
I doubt it. So
Okay.
it will be up to us, but I think their standards are actually pretty forward-thinking. And so if that ever came to pass, I think it would, we would certainly pay attention to it, but I haven't heard anything. I don't anticipate anything like that.
But
and
the
in my
math,
conversations with MDE folks in speaking about math, the curriculum that a lot of our teachers are already self-choosing are curriculum that have been not suggested by MD, but just inside conversations with folks who get into a lot of schools and get to observe different resources being used, that there's a lot of really good piloting happening in our district.
yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
It's helpful.
I did just have a few questions that I would like to ask. I wanted to just follow up on one of the ways in which well, first I wanted to say that I have seen firsthand at the grade school, at the elementary school level, students being able to be good at math. Doing things like making sure the angle is right in raising a stick up to create a fort outside. And as an adult in that space, being able to say, wow, you are really good at math, and just seeing them light up, because that might have been the first time they've ever heard it. So I think amazing things are happening at that level. But I do also share that middle school concern, having parented students who are kind of good at math naturally, born with those brains. Just wondering if this is something that students have to self-select, and are we putting too much of that burden on them at an age when it might not be cool to go take an extra math class? Or I'm just wondering, how is this going to be managed kind of at that level, making sure that those students who this really is their space, that they're able to be in that space without having to navigate the other things they're navigating at that age.
There's nothing cooler than extra math. Just let you
I
know.
would not argue with
There's
that.
nothing cooler. Let the record show
Little
that.
badge of honor.
Put that in the meeting minutes.
Okay, all right, we're going to put that. That's going to be our new motto as a school board.
T-shirts. I think it's the way the teachers will share out, and I think we'll have a uniform message in how we craft, how we want to share this opportunity with students, and making it very clear that there is no pressure to do more. I want to be very, very clear that all of the math standards, K-8, all have their place and their purpose, and that we want to be very intentional about making sure that students are getting the content knowledge of taking that course. And so I really, and I've been a middle school teacher for many, many, many years, and it really, there should be an element of strong student desire. And I think we live in a culture that is very high achieving in math and very high goal setting, just typically in this area. And students can feel a lot of external pressure to push beyond what is their grade level standards. And that can also lead to feelings of failure and inadequacy if they're pushed too far too quickly. So I think there is a lot to be said for readiness and capacity and internal desire and intrinsic motivation to do more, because what is a little lift in middle school can certainly snowball into a larger lift in high school. So I think that, like Anne brought up earlier, try it out, and there's nothing lost if you choose to try and engage in some of this work and then find, I have a lot of other things going on. I'm playing basketball, or I have hockey, or all these other things, and I don't have this extra time to devote to putting into something extra. That's okay, and you can make those choices. And then prioritization is a big executive functioning skill that is challenging for middle schoolers, but it's a great way for us to model our limitations as humans. And sometimes we have to opt in, and sometimes we have to decide this maybe isn't a good fit for us today. And those are hard conversations to have, to be sure. And so we just want to be really cautious and protective of our students and making sure that they're not having any feelings of failure if something is not a fit. So I'm trying to be very mindful of that, and hopefully fostering really healthy conversations, when we do approach that with our students in the late fall, early winter.
If I could add to that, we piloted a model of this last year at the middle level with our Algebra 1 class. And I know that the teachers, like the students, were interested in participating, and we had good participation in it. And we also had good outcomes with students being successful at it. So I don't know if I'm in the same camp of extra math is always good, but I do think that our students value learning and achievement. And I think when it's their interest area that they are inclined to participate. And what is particularly helpful with what Ilsa has designed is that those students were doing that really on their own. They didn't have the extra win support being offered to them that we're talking about, and they didn't necessarily have the level of feedback from the staff that we're talking about because it was such a small experiment. So I think that Ilsa has put together a really solid way to provide those opportunities to students who are ready and interested. And I think, by communicating with all parents and having the teacher be part of the conversation as well, there are lots of people to provide encouragement to students to make sure those who should really engage in this give it a shot.
Great, thank you. That was all the questions I had. I really appreciate you being here tonight and giving us a sneak peek on what's to come for our students. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Mary-Piri.
Thanks to the three of you for all the thought that you put into this presentation. Elsa, I know I told you like 7:20. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, thank you for staying, Dr. Camphy. We will now move on to our new business, the A&I plan and budget. I don't know if for the viewing audience, if we just want to give a quick update on what this is, why it was in consent, and then I believe Clerk Thompson has some specific questions.
I think we can, thank you, Chair Andreessen. We can share with folks listening in that we do receive achievement and integration resources from the state, and the purpose of the achievement and integration, otherwise known as A&I program is to pursue racial and economic integration to improve and increase student achievement, create equitable education opportunities for our students, and reduce academic disparities that are based on race or economic backgrounds. So that's sort of the purpose of those resources. And then we try to be very strategic with how we, what we pay for and how we leverage those resources in Hopkins. So Clerk Thompson, do you want to ask your questions? And then Dr. Camphy is currently, I would say, a pretty well-informed expert on A&I and can hopefully answer your questions, and we can all help her.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it just seemed like there was so much in there that, I just wanted to be sure, before I just pass something in consent. So I think Chair Andreessen had said, could you also just comment on why it was originally in consent? Or maybe it was.
That's a good question. I think we just have a strong history of past practice here in Hopkins. So I think our title plans, our A&I plans, these are all examples of plans that are either on consent or in the, what do we call the reports at the end of the agenda?
Incidental.
Incidental reports.
I can also help clarify that too if you, once you're done.
Yeah, and we can, what we have been trying to do is identify topics that especially our new board members might have questions about and put them as workshop agenda items so we can try to, keep being in that space where we're identifying meaty topics that we think you might have questions about, put them as a workshop item so that, you don't have to pull it from consent.
I know we were on spring break last week, so we didn't get to kind of fully hash that out. So that makes sense.
But past practice.
Yeah, understood.
Well, and it's also, this is one of many, many, many reports that we are required as a district to submit to the Minnesota Department of Education. And what my understanding is, that is the practice of the board and the administration of Hopkins Schools is that the one that we get a very detailed report out is the world's best workforce. And that is the very comprehensive report, which a lot of this information is rolled up into that. So we do get updated on this information, and that's why this is part of consent, because it's a very routine, regular report that gets submitted, and the information is included elsewhere that we get more detailed, and we get to ask questions about it. So it is part of our school board practice to review this information, just not the report, which is what we have before us today in consent.
That makes sense. I feel a little bit embarrassed, but I
Oh, that's
appreciate
okay.
you
No, that's
connecting
okay.
the dots.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a lot of information. Do you remember when Dr. Camphy, Dr. Holm, Dr. Ertl were all at the table? And I think Missy McDonald
In the
was
fall,
with the
yep.
team presenting on World's Best Workforce.
Oh, yeah.
So then A&I was part
Right.
of that report
Okay.
where we went into
And to be clear,
depth.
what is a little confusing about the way the whole thing works is that A&I and the world's best workforce, there's kind of like a year lag. So when we were here in the fall, we were talking about the application that had already finished and we were done with. And then the one that I just submitted to you is the current program that we are engaged in this year, for this year, next year, and the year after. So when we come back in the fall, we'll talk about this program specifically as it aligns to World's Best Workforce. But the report that we were talking about in the fall was actually from 3 years ago. So I don't think you should feel stupid because there's much to be confused about in terms of how MDE sets this up.
Yes.
Definitely.
Well, and I appreciate the comment about the 1 year lag as well, because that's something I was going to ask as well, is like, just from a timing perspective, it said this was due in March of 2023, and here we are, April
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah, so
asking
it's
the
my
board for
understanding,
approvals.
and this is my first year in this role, but I guess I would assume that probably my predecessor submitted this report last year as well. So it's a 3-year report, and every year we can do updates on it. And so I believe the intent was just to provide you with an update to where we're at with it as far as the implementation of the first year of the program, or of this particular application.
And it also has to be part of the board meeting because I don't know if it's part of legislation or part of MDE or a federal requirement, but I as board chair have to sign off on it and the superintendent does too. So it has to be part of our board meeting, which is why it goes on consent, because it's a routine annual thing.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm good with the background. I appreciate the explanation. So I guess just a couple questions here. So it's a 3-year report, but we're allowed to update it every year? Mm-hmm. Okay. And what I'm looking at here is an update for 24, 25, 26.
Right, so do you think about the easiest way to explain this? The current year we're living in, so fiscal year '24, was the first year of this application. And the way that the finances were used were part of a budget prepared by my predecessor. And then every year in April, you true that up. So you come and you look at, did we spend the money the way that we said we intended to? And then you also have to, if you're going to make any shifts for the following year, you have to submit them at that time. And so, for example, you might say that instead of staffing this position, you're going to staff a different position. And so then that would be a reason to have an update. In particular, there's also an element of accountability in it, where if we haven't met our goals, we have to shift some of our funding to align with improvement funding. And so in this year's report, that was an element that we did have to pay attention to. And so that necessitated some changes that maybe wouldn't have happened in other years. And then, you know, a year from now, we would be doing the same thing again. We'd be looking at, okay, here's what we said we were going to do. How does that line up with how it actually played out? And is that the path we want to take forward for the final year? What we can't change are the larger strategies. So within that 3 years, we've identified several big buckets that we believe will move the mission of ANI forward. We can make small adjustments to like how we live those out, but we can't come in and say, well, we aren't worried about that strategy anymore. We aren't even going to do that. We are beholden to those strategies for the full 3 years of the plan.
Okay. And in this bucket number, goal type achievement disparity, there are some FastBridge target scores for math and reading, A math and A reading. When do those get assessed, and what would be the plan for updating the board on how we're tracking towards
So
that?
that's where the 1-year lag comes in. We will next fall get data, we'll look at our data for this year, and then when we're reporting on the world's best workforce next fall, we'll be reporting as to whether we met those goals or not. Okay. So this year was the year of implementation for those goals, and then we report about whether or not we met them when we come back in the fall.
Okay.
As part of World's Best Workforce?
Say that again.
As part of World's
Yes, as
Best
part of the
Workforce.
World's Best Workforce report.
Yeah, that is good. I think my only comment is, I think I might be concerned about how much we're trying to pack into World's Best Workforce. So, you know, I would certainly want to see this at some point. And so, I don't know, maybe we have a couple different updates under the bucket of World's Best Workforce.
Well, as you're aware, and the reason we're talking about it right now is it is always given to you to be seen because it's part of the consent calendar, and it is our job as board members to review every item in the consent calendar.
Yeah, but
So we can certainly have discussions about it when it comes before us as part of the world's best workforce, because the information is in there.
okay.
We have added a workshop item on the June 11th board meeting, which is our last board meeting before summer. And the title of that right now is Student Learning and Achievement Growth. So we'll have a team that will present any information that we do have based on our fall to spring assessments, and we can give you a snapshot of growth over this year at that time as well.
Awesome, okay, thank you.
And I would also just like to note that it's my understanding and has been, I think it is a very innovative way to implement some efficiencies and cost savings for our district to integrate these two reports, because it is quite onerous to be sending these off to the reporting agencies that need to get them on our administration staff, which, and so I think, one, they go together really well. I like seeing how they interplay between each other, World's Best Workforce and ANI, and I think that bringing them together is not solely a Hopkins thing, but is very innovative and a really good use of our resources, especially our administrative resources, which is something we've been talking about at this table as we're facing budget reductions. So I would like to keep it the way it is. Any other further discussion on this?
I think just in terms of the World's Best Workforce report itself, we do have some constraints on us by the state around when we do that, and it has to be scheduled as a hearing, so all of the information has to be there at the same time. So that's just another procedural thing to be aware of. But as I'm looking, as I was reading through the ANI plan before the meeting, so many of the themes in there are things that we talk about regularly at this table. So restorative practices, Freedom School, when we talk about summer programming. So a lot of the work that's included in the report are things that have been integrated into our agendas on an ongoing basis. So
I also saw snacks for classrooms on here.
Yes.
To be clear, I think that's some very intentional work that we've been doing over the last several years in thinking about the federal and state funding that we receive. And it does come with expectations, parameters, restrictions, however you want to look at it. We don't want that to be separate work from the work we're doing every day. We want to make the connections between here's what the government recommends we do in best practices, and here's how it shows up here in Hopkins. So how do we make sure that we are utilizing those dollars in a way that moves us forward in multiple spaces?
Thank you. Any further questions?
Chair Andreessen, I had a quick one. So, and just to make sure it's clear in my mind, so say that, hey, we, want to increase the percentage of elementary schools that are target or low risk, certain percent. And so, did I hear correctly that if we didn't hit that, right, that we have to have a plan in the world's best workforce, and that would be the time to kind of...
Part of ANI. So the plan that we're in right now is 24 to 26. And so an example of what we're needing to do is that there were a couple of things that we didn't meet in the previous plan, and they monitor it yearly.
Okay.
So the final year of the previous plan, there were a couple of goals that weren't met.
Okay.
And so as a result, in the following year's funding, which, logically, it would have made sense to implement that now this year, because we're talking about things that didn't happen last year the way we wanted them to.
Right.
But the turnover time of them reviewing the information doesn't allow for that. So instead, next year's budget has some ways that we're addressing some of those goals that we didn't meet. That being said, when they come to us next fall again, they aren't going to look at that previous plan. They're going to look at this plan, and they're going to say, have you met the goals of this plan? And so then we're going to be accountable to this plan as we think about funding for fiscal year '26.
Okay, so, sorry, there's a lot of bureaucracy there.
There is.
So do we have to lead it, right? Like we're shooting a duck, like we lead it a little bit, right? Like it's a year in the future, so you have to shoot ahead of the target, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't hunt, just let the record show, but,
I was like, what does that mean?
yeah. You ever play duck hunt? Okay, anyways. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here and
Yeah, of course.
and answering our questions. I think it was a great discussion, so thank you, Clerk Thompson, for pulling this out for consideration and discussion. With that being said, do I have a motion to approve the ANI plan and budget?
I move that we approve the ANI plan and budget.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. I have a second. All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ANI plan and budget has been passed and approved. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne.
Yep.
We will now move on to policies in first read. I would like to invite Assistant and Superintendent Nick Lightfoot to the table. As mentioned before, our Vice Chair Ross cannot be here with us this evening due to a prior commitment, so I will ask Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to give us an update on the policies that we see before us and any revisions that the monitoring committee has gone through.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you
I get
for
to be
being
with
here.
you for the riveting reading that I am sure all of you engaged in related to the 700 series of policies that is in front of you this evening.
It was
So-
even better the second time through.
Ooh, there you go. Repeat riveting. And for those that like the alliteration, the R is intentional. As far as the policies that are in front of you this evening, the monitoring committee did go through the 700 series. The 700 series is the fiscal and business operations series. So of course, that is the theme that runs through all of these in front of you. They are a continuation of the work that was done previously as well. Specifically in this set of series, that's why you see things like the opening policy of 707 related to student transportation services. As you will see, this policy does have a lot of detail with it. As part of our practice and protocol, we do include the model MSBA policy as well as the Hopkins policy. There have been intentionalities over time with the board to make sure that the Hopkins policy is as transparent as it can be, specific to services, practices, in the particulars. That's why you see more of that in the Hopkins policy than you do in the model. That being said, most of the model policy changes that were done were particular for language changes and statutory reference. With that being said, the monitoring committee reviewed it and does not have any specific changes recommended for 707, but are open and available for questions as board members may have them.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Director Hartland.
Starting in 707, I don't have a specific question about this, but I did want to take an extra moment to point out all of the kinds of transportation that the school district is bound by policy and law to provide, including transportation of students with disabilities, including in all their specialized equipment that's necessary, and to all of their appropriate appointments and supports. Transportation for students attending non-public schools, which is something I've talked about a bit from the treasurer's report perspective as a service that we provide to, well, it says not public schools, but that are to private schools within our districts. Activities, homeless students, and a whole range of students and their needs, and that accounts for a really intensely high cost to the district.
Thank you.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
I just had one question, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. The one thing I didn't see in here that I was just curious what your thought on it is anything that's necessarily providing guidance around the school district creating a contract with the company that operates the bus service. Is that found in a different policy, or is that just kind of not necessarily bound by a policy?
It's an excellent question. So if you take a look, there are various ways that the school district can look toward the way in which it utilizes transportation within its control. And the reason I say that is because it's really up to you as a board and how you look at establishing the way in which we deliver that service. You can contract for service. Some districts actually take the service in-house, have their own bus drivers, have their own labor that is hired accordingly as such, and really oversee the whole practice and component of it. So as you see it here, yes, this outlines the general terms of it, but how we actually go about providing it is all within the board context. Part of what you will approve at some point are those renewed contracts for services with providers. When we do that, we follow the RFP processes for service, as it is a substantial cost, as had been brought out. So of course, there are different ways that we can look at doing it. Part of the analysis that's important from the budgetary aspect is looking at, does the cost of labor and the ownership of the buses and the actual facilitation of that prevent budget components for being considered, one being more positive, one being more negative. And that always has been part of the consideration when we look at the pros, the cons of what does it look like to have a contract for service and the cost of those. Looking at keeping it in-house and trying to figure out if our own management of labor and operations is something that may be more fiscally advantageous. So in a weird way, to answer it, the policy still would be general. What you would see different in the policy is that if we were looking at more management of our own drivers and our own sets of conditions, you may see more policy or component elements about how we do more particular upkeep, how we have more specific for a little bit in here, but more on the management of any drug tests, other components that come with more of the employee elements, if we have and continue to work toward employing our own bus drivers, if that helps.
That was real helpful. Thank you.
And for clarification, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, RFP's request for proposal, correct? So we post if we were changing or thinking about changing our contracted services. We post publicly for that and allow contractors to.
Yep, and walking through the process with that RFP, as it is above the statutory limits, also some components of the fiscal policies that you'll see in front of you. As it is above that, yes, we would follow through with the RFPs for that service and then receive those RFPs, and then as a district bring before you the final contract so that you would have the opportunity to review that final contract before any change would be done.
Would any review of such a contract for compliance with this policy, where does that happen? Because I mean, the board, of course, would read the contract, but it is not, it's my understanding anyway, that the board's role is not to literally kind of line item by line item ensure compliance with our own policy.
Yeah, absolutely. It really ties back to the whole discussion that you were having in the workshop about board governance. So the board governance is we take this policy, we use this policy, we also make sure that any contractors have this policy as part of the RFP. So when we actually write the RFP, we include these are the terms that we need to be met, given the board guidance from the policy itself, so that when we write the RFP, we utilize this information, include this information, and then expect the compliance of the contractor to meet the terms that have been outlined as part of our policy, which is why this is really such a strong document, because what it does is it drives the actual RFP, and the RFP drives the actual expectations that are part of the contract. You as a board then review those terms and then have the opportunity to make sure that it meets those levels of compliance.
Thank you.
Chair Andreessen, I you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, Assistant Dr. Lightfoot. Sorry, I'll get used to that eventually. Are there SLAs, service level agreements, baked into those RFPs? So for example, whatever company, their bus was late, or, their driver was absent, or they forgot a route, is there a financial or clawback mechanism in any of those contracts?
Absolutely. Performance levels, performance agreements, non-compliance, non-performance, all a part of the terms that are built into that.
Perfect.
So those are accountability elements that we consider as we take a look at working with any contractor that we would be seeking service from.
Great, thank you.
And that is also on the regulations part of this policy, that the driver safe training and review and qualifications are also in that, which is good. Any other comments or questions?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Nick, in the MSBA model policy, number 4, eligibility, does the district have any history of letting families know that students who reside 2 miles or more from the school will receive transportation, but less than that, walking or biking?
It does. There have been over time as we've looked at the fiscal implications of the transportation elements relating to bus stops as well as walking distances and the creation of additional routes. Part of the complexity, and Director Chapin-Duca can speak to this as well, but part of the complexity for us is where walking routes fall generally are also interrupted by highways.
Yeah.
And so it is even though homes might have a short proximal distance to a school, the highway that crosses that leaves no walking opportunities. And we've had some great community questions come in about safe routes to school. Part of the sidewalks that have come in and were developed at the Glen Lake area were actually a result of a significant grant that Hopkins did receive in order to facilitate the walking component for Glen Lake. And there are some additional interest in that and additional funds in ongoing ways. But part of the challenge for us is creating that and being mindful of the highway element. But yes, to the question, excellent question. There have been discussions about that 2-mile range and the 1 mile. Part of the analysis, if that is a question and a fiscal element that we'd want to make sure that we do, is looking at that highway element as part of that factor.
Can it be both? So that it's, if there is a very busy street or highway, then.
Yep. Very much so. And I think Meadowbrook's a great example of that. When you look at where Meadowbrook is located and then even like crossing Glenwood, some of the other levels of traffic that are considered the highways, those are some of the other factors that we look at when we consider the overall ability of walkers to walk. And sometimes that's then offset by back to the question of the policy and the employment of crossing guards in different ways that we can offset and still allow walking, maybe minimize routes, but then part of that, even if you think about West and Baker Road, is the crossing guard and the facilitation of that to allow individuals to do walking paths that would cross Baker and get into the residential areas that are north of West.
And districts that charge for open enrolled students who want to be bused in, is that embedded into their policy, or is that a practice outside of their transportation policy?
Great question. I'll go back and double check. The statutory prohibition is that for open enrollment, a district can allow families to pay for service. The district cannot supplement the service. So in other words, using district funds for open enrolled individuals to supplement that transportation as almost a means of a recruitment element, for lack of a better term, are not allowable. However, complete coverage by families for transportation is an available option that districts can consider.
Thank you.
What would that cost? I guess depends on how far.
It depends. There are different ways and different, fiscal analysis of this. There are, and in part, there are some agreements. And as we take a look at all of these components, we have an agreement with the District of Edina that has been in place for years related to their transportation, as it is on the border of Hopkins and what that looks like. In addition, there are considerations for where bus stops can be placed in proximity, even within boundaries, that can be accessed by open enrollment places. There's also been even some analysis of, can you create bus stops that have drop-off sites so that individuals can utilize that space as a bus drop-off site. Sometimes those have been supervised with staff to support that as an internal bus stop. Just some different ways and different considerations that can afford the meeting of the statutory terms, because you do have a statutory ability as an open enrollment family to look at a bus stop within the boundaries of the Hopkins School District. So you can get there as long as it's within the school district, and depending on that accessibility, there may be some different ways of consideration that the board could look toward for facilitating those transportation aspects of how we run the program here in Hopkins.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions on this policy, or are we doing them as a slate?
Should we do them as a slate?
Let's do them as a slate.
All righty. 711 is school bus video camera. We do have specific policy, as you see, related here, so that there's notice for individuals that, yes, we do have school bus and school bus video cameras. The policy is here. Again, there were really no specific changes that were done in the model policy. No recommended changes that were done here, more on the specific regulations. Happy to address any questions about 711. Plus, it's just fun to say 711.
I think we can move on to the less fun 714.
All right, 714. Financial management goals, unassigned fund balance. As I have said before, this is really the fiscal series and business operations, so that's why you see all of these together. The monitoring committee did review 714. As we did review 714, there again, no particular changes really in the deep level of revisions of anything that the Minnesota School Boards Association did. So with that, if there are specific questions about the financial management goals, more than happy to address those as well.
Don't see any questions. Moving on to 721.
721, there were some changes. In 721, the uniform grant guidance policy, there were some elevated levels of amounts that the district can look toward. We did, as a monitoring committee and in conversation with our business office, increase those, specifically under the procurement section component, so that we have smaller purchases, and those smaller purchases amounts and micro purchases were redefined with increased levels of spending. So we have acknowledged that, but that really was the only change in the grant guidance policy.
Dr. Lightfoot.
And those, again, were just statutory changes that we met.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
I admit that this was a doozy of a policy. It says things like omnicircular in this policy, and I was wondering if you can give as brief as possible as what is this just governing what we need to do and how we safeguard funds that we get from grants?
Yeah. What you're going to see here is so much language that's really built into the Federal Register. And the Federal Register, of course, is a recipient of federal funds. That's where you see the references in statute to CFR. And these are uniform grant guidelines that as a recipient, we really have to follow. So much of this is really based on the Federal Register and the requirements of the Register, specific to those sections, and then the responsibilities that we have, specific to those expectations and grant requirements. So, I mean, in essence, that's why you see so much of that particular language, is that it's really deep into the register, which are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages that are based on federal procurement.
Okay. That does help then, and I wasn't wildly off base, so that's personally gratifying. Another thing that I did want to point out, it's not really a question, but there's in section 2, line F, they talk about equipment meaning tangible personal property, and wanted to point out to the community that as part of our onboarding to our new Oracle ERP, that the district is undertaking an audit of sorts to better understand all of the property that we do have, all of the items that we do have, in order to have more clarity around our assets. And I assume that that will make at least marginally easier, potentially reporting on some of these, if needed, because we received a grant.
Mm-hmm. Yes, marginally easier to track, but still equally as difficult to figure out what having a useful life of more than 1 year and a personal per unit acquisition cost, which exceeds the lesser of the capitalization level established by the non-federal entity for financial statement purposes, or $5,000.
Oh my God. All right, marginally. A word that means less than that.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
Dr. Lightfoot, could you mention again, at the beginning of section E, the procurement methods, you know, making the dollar threshold larger than the MSBA policy? Did you say that that is because of the latest published in the federal guidelines, the CFR, or was that a decision Hopkins is making?
No, excellent question. These were the amended amounts in the register when the register was updated. So periodically, the government will go through and do updates. And in the model MSBA policy, we have the ability on page 2 of the model policy, it identifies that school districts may choose to increase their federal micro purchase threshold to $25,000, which also aligns with the Minnesota limit. So when we went through, we made that adjustment, moving that up. Also, there were previous adjustments that, because in our 3-year policy and the period of time that had lapsed between, we made the change in section 2 from what was previous in policy of $150,000 to $250,000 to be considered a small purchase under the procurement methods and terms according to the federal uniform grant guidelines.
Any other questions on this one?
Yeah, sorry, just one more quick one. And so in actuality, that eases the operation of making purchases for the district. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, it does, and it gives more flexibility. If you set the level of a micro purchase, then anything above you have additional other reporting elements and reporting requirements. So what it allows to do is greater flexibility and utilizing the funds with greater latitude. But of course, when we get the grant, it's really the specifics of the grant which detail and determine how the funds will be used.
That's helpful.
Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
Great. Are we ready to move on to 750?
Now we're getting into the good stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, the good stuff. The stuff that's interesting, you know, I mean, and I really appreciate that as we think about the world in which we live, that we as well address the copyright components, because There are definite elements to what we do, and even as well-intended as we are, the educational elements do need to be reminded on a continual basis that copyrighted material does have specific guidelines that we as an educational profession need to make sure that we have in front of us as we honor the copyright of the individuals that have done the intellectual work to create and put all of this together, as well as utilizing the educational value and making sure that we do so in compliance. So what we have here with Policy 750 is really just outlining that, yes, we do make sure that we have the terms of fair use outlined. We have the components of copyright as part of our work with district media services so that if individuals have questions, we also have points of contact in the district that they can go to for those questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have a quick question. So the wrinkle for generative AI, right? If somebody uses something from ChatGPT, there's a lawsuit with the New York Times, right? Like, is that considered copyrighted material? Does, you get into the weeds pretty quick. Does this apply to generatively created material?
Yeah, it's so new, and it's such an excellent question that the answer is potentially it might. Right now in the lawsuit, at least as part of the progression of what's been out there so far, is what is the source content that's utilized to generate the material itself. So in part of that, it's still such an open landscape of when it's generated from AI, who's the actual owner, and in part, the way that copyright is working right now is that on the other end of it, individuals who have sets of information now can utilize technology to go out and literally search bot. They will look for spaces that their material is being used, and then of course, once they do that, find that it's being used, then of course they send notices of, look, you're using this without permission. So even following that theory, there would need to be some kind of source of owner that would be then coming forward and saying, this is mine, this is the proof that it's mine, and therefore your utilization of it means that I have the ability to come forward and say that I have been damaged. If I've been damaged, then I have the responsibility to prove harm so that I can claim those damages. The tough part with copyright, and why we always look at copyright as another issue, is that even if there hasn't been much damage, and in fact many courts have said even in educational settings, the damage might be small because there may have been unauthorized readings of books or other kinds of things. And that may be small, and it may be like $1 or $10 decisions that courts will actually hand down. The bigger element is the component of the attorney fees that go along with it. So those are the major components in copyright as well. Unintended copyright violations, of course, if they're intended, there are additional damages. But when it comes to the AI element, there's still a little bit of an open book on it, but there again, it would need to be traceable to the source, and that I think is part of the complexity. But it's an excellent, it's an excellent way of how are we looking at living in a digital world and what is the responsibility that comes with the utilization of AI.
Are you generating, no pun intended, a AI policy that would supplement maybe?
I don't know if the monitoring committee has thought about that. We might want to chat GPT to see if there is one.
Yeah, create a policy for yourself.
I'm sure there is one.
I'm sure there is, yeah.
I'm thinking that this could be work that's done in alignment with our digital literacy work, and then also waiting for some information to come down from the courts too on kind of like the parameters around plagiarism with AI. I'm actually tuning into a Minnesota State System webinar about this tomorrow, so I will bring
Great.
back any useful info that could
Awesome.
help us here in our context. So
Yeah, it was also part of the NSBA conference that I went to in February. They talked a lot about that and the implications for school districts and also around, all this kind of stuff that comes up, but also how a well-crafted policy can make AI a powerful tool for school districts. So it is our work coming forward.
Just have to make it easy enough to not go to somewhere else, right? Like,
Right.
if you have to jump through 100 hoops, yeah, I'll just chat GPT it. But if there's like this way we don't get, you won't get in trouble, right?
Right.
Okay, right. I think Microsoft does some stuff with kind of on-premise AI, and like it doesn't leave the premises and stuff like that, so.
Well, and what I appreciate is it is you as leaders also leading into the spaces that our learners will live in. And how do we also help them be part of that process too?
Right, instead of thinking about like prohibiting AI,
Right.
what are ethical uses of AI? Right?
Absolutely.
How can it become a tool that we use in education? I really want to talk about lifetime passes.
Absolutely. Free admission, lifetime passes. Employees who have completed 25 years of service will be eligible. District resident, 62 years of age. Piece about this one is that it's always good to double check that we are implementing the policies that we have to make sure that we have common alignment with that. We have gone back and we have looked at that as well. So just to give the board an update on that. And as you will see here, it has been the practice of the district since the 80s to facilitate these for community members as well as those who have 25 years of service. So questions on that?
I did have one question about the exceptions. Is there reasoning behind the exceptions for drama, hockey, and I get tournaments and events that aren't sponsored by the district, but why specifically? Main question is why hockey?
The charges, this goes back to some of the fee elements. Hockey games had some additional charges for facility use that were offset and had specific location components. Same thing with some of the drama elements. I do think that's one to kind of go back and look at. I mean, in particular, we can go back and look at and say, are these still really necessary elements? We haven't done that with the activities department. We certainly could, if that's a desire before a second read.
I was mainly curious, but that makes sense. I mean, in particular drama, I know a lot of cost goes into those productions.
It would probably be a good idea to run this by activities, just so that we understand, like maybe we need to be adding more exceptions, maybe we can take off hockey, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Do we know how many passes are typically given out every year? Like,
It's a minimal amount. I know our marketing and communication, I'm looking with the eyes that are in the back of my head, probably toward Director Goldati.
one?
There's
One.
one.
Retirees.
Our teacher retirees get it, you said? Yes. Okay.
People probably don't know about it.
Yes, there is a senior in the community who I know who requested one, and I think that more people will probably be knowing about it soon. Because this particular senior was very
They are
excited.
a highly networked individual.
It might be worth checking on drama too, because I know some people over 62 who'd be interested in that too.
Absolutely. I mean, well-attended, well opportunities, and the faces of our young people that are on that stage that get to see full audiences are well rewarded.
Plus, we're getting really good in that space.
Oh, yeah.
Drama, our
Oh my gosh.
theater and music presentations and musicals. Ooh.
Yes,
So good.
Absolutely stunning.
So do we want to move this to maybe old business next meeting? The
Yeah.
monitoring, okay. Did not want my question to result in more work, but
I think
Will
it's
do.
good, yeah.
great.
So that completes the slate for the evening.
All right, well, I would move that the board approve the above policies except for policy 751, which will be put onto old business for our upcoming board meeting. And further, the board directs the administration to prepare the policies with suggested revisions for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The policies have been approved in first read, and policy 751 has been moved to new business, old business. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here. I don't know if I need you for the resolution calling a closed session. No, I got it? Okay. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. We are moving to a resolution calling an executive session. But first, I would like to give everyone here around the table the opportunity to introduce yourselves or make yourself more fully known to our community and offer up a board report if you have one. And Director Westmoreland, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jen Westmoreland, she, her. I've been on the school board. Well, this is my 7th year on the school board, so I'm in the middle of my 2nd term. And I have been kind of consumed with my dissertation that I defended right before spring break, so it was kind of nice timing for celebration there. But the reason I bring it up is it was really inspired by a lot of the work that we've been doing here in Hopkins schools around centering student voice and emancipatory teaching practices and culturally responsive teaching practices. So the research I conducted was at a community college and very much inspired by the work that we've been doing here over the past 6 years. So
Wonderful.
Just wanted to thank this community.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very thrilled.
Hi, I'm Jiming Zhao. This is my 3rd month on the school board. I've got 2 kids in the Xing Xing program over here in Eisenhower. And yeah, I have no board report because I've been off.
But you're very excited about math,
Very excited about math, but that's
extra math in
yes,
particular.
for everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Andreessen. I am in my 2nd term, so 5th year being on the school board, and I have 2 children, one of whom is a recent grad and will shortly be actually graduating from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, largely due to CIS and PSEO and AP. So there we go. And I also have a sophomore at the high school. And I am staff at Gateway Elementary.
Hi, I'm Rhoda Maria Perry-Reed, Superintendent. I have a 6th grader at West who loves math. And I have a sophomore at the high school who also loves math, but when he was in elementary school, he was told that he was not gifted enough to be in quote-unquote gifted math. And so that's really impacted his self-efficacy and his thinking about his own ability and aptitude in math. So I often think of him as one of many examples of students who, like, we need to tell all of our students, you can be really good in math, and here's some opportunities. And I already did my board report earlier.
You want me to talk to him? I can talk to him.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Treasurer Rachel Hartland, and I use she, her pronouns. And I have 3 kids in our district who are in their 8th, 6th, and 4th grade years. We have lived in the community in Minnetonka for going on 8 years now, and I am proud to be in my 3rd year on the board and my 3rd or so month as treasurer. I don't have a long report because I have, as I mentioned, kind of been out of town, but immediately before leaving, when I went out of town, I attended Hopkins High School, and Praise, our student board rep, took me on a tour of the school to talk about some things that are going really well, a few things that need attention, and one that stood out was Ms. Ballum and Ms. Brandenburg from the high school, who run a couple of programs, but specifically oversee the culinary part of our high school. She mentioned how they had recently reworked their entire curriculum to update it and make it so that all of their students were cooking things that A, they wanted to eat, and B, were kind of culturally, inclusive and modern, and that represented a fairly large savings and eliminated waste of food. And they have ovens that are there that are kind of on their last legs, and so they're working on some proposals in order to cost efficiently get some new ones. And they have every single block packed full, and they have a waiting list for students who would like to join. And they even provide services for some of our students that have special needs, so they learn real-world skills within their high school environment. So it was really interesting, and it's something that we will probably hear a bit more about. And then I wanted to also thank the board for inviting the robotics team. I'm sorry that I missed their presentation, but as you know, I've been kind of an outspoken supporter of that, and I love how well they tied their presentation. I saw some of it into Vision 2031, and I'm kind of excited about what comes next for them, and especially as we engage in our next certification site now that the CNA program is up and running, and how we now kind of shift our focus to tech, coding, AI, and robotics, bringing more of that into our high school for more scholars.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Brooke Roper, and this is my first term serving on the board. I have 2 wonderful children in the district who attend Gatewood Elementary, which one of them will be 7 on Friday, so super happy about that. 2 quick things, more so just like exciting opportunities that I had over the past few weeks. On last Thursday, I was invited by U.S. Senator Tina Smith's office to join her for networking and in happy hour to connect with other leaders who are in the space of climate change. And so I was like with a bunch of climate leaders, and it was just really good connecting and networking with them and learning about what they are doing in the district, not in the district, excuse me, in their respective sectors and organizations. And I'm just looking really forward to introducing them to our work with electric school buses, and also just making introductions to the team so you all can begin to connect with them and find a way of collaborating if there's any collaboration efforts going on. And then also today had the opportunity to attend a press release for Minneapolis Public Schools. They were awarded 2 electric school buses from Highland, and they the deputy commissioner from Environmental Protection Agency was here, and folks from, were representing like the Biden campaign, and just, was talking about investing in America. And it was just really interesting seeing all of the folks there. The Commissioner of Education was there, Superintendent Lisa Sells Adams was there as well. A few kids had spoke. A busload of kids got to ride an electric school bus, and they were so excited today. And it was just a really, really great event. So just really happy that I was able to attend that today and be a part of that wonderful press conference. And so looking forward to Hopkins having one soon as well. So, but that is all that I have in my board reports for today.
I'm Kai Thompson. I am in my third month as the clerk on the board. I have 3 kids in the district, ranging from 3rd grade to 8th grade. I have no board report, but like Director Zhao is excited about math, I'm excited about book club, so.
Great. Well, thank you all for those updates. It's nice to know what everyone's working on and passionate about and bringing into the district. So with that, I would like to propose that an executive session be called pursuant to Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Minnesota Statute 13D.03, to discuss negotiation strategies related to the Hopkins Association of School Administrators contract for the 2023 through 24 school years. Do I have a motion that the board approve the following resolution? It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to discuss negotiation strategy related to the HASA contract for the 2023-24 school years, that the meeting be held in person and commence immediately following adjournment of this regular meeting. Further, that it be noted that all school members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of intention to call this executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed, so the board moves into, the board will move into closed session after this meeting is adjourned. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned at 9:22 p.m. and we are moving into closed session. Thank you all for being with us this evening.